for an exclusive interview with one of the most controversial, influential and unique political figures of our time. Boris Johnson will be in studio discussing his new memoir, Unleashed, the gripping story of how he dealt with plotting politicians, problematic princes and a pandemic. From Boris bikes to Brexit and everything else in between. This Sunday at 9:30 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Monday, the 30th of September. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood, live from the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham.
Well, yes, the Conservative conference kicks off today in Birmingham. Shadow Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, he's kicked off by accusing Labour of lying about the £22 billion financial black hole, while Tory leadership candidate Kemi Badenoch is under fire for suggesting maternity pay has gone too far for women. But she says her comments have been badly misrepresented.
I've been a Minister for Women and Equalities. I've had 3 children. I've had maternity leave 3 times. I don't need anyone to tell me about maternity pay. I've been one of the people fighting for that, and I won't have my views misrepresented.
And BBC Bias, the broadcaster, has been accused of institutional hostility to Israel by 3 huge Jewish organisations over its coverage of the conflict in the Middle East. And we'll bring you the latest updates from the region with defence editor at The Telegraph. And does Sir Keir Starmer have a woman problem in his party? Well, Rosie Duffield resigned as a Labour MP over the weekend. She slammed the party for pursuing cruel policies, and she claimed that the lads are in charge. Is she right? And the government is attempting to draw a line under Freebie Gate. Ministers are to face new rules over how and when they declare donations of hospitality and gifts and the like. But is that missing the point? So, Tom, it's now 12:01. What's in store in Birmingham today?
Well, the Shadow Chancellor, former Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, has already spoken, but really what's going on the stage is a bit of a sideshow compared to what's going on the floor, where you see representatives for those 4 leadership candidates milling around, handing out lanyards, handing out treats. Tom Tugendhat has even been handing out fake tan called Tom Tugendhat. I had a Tom Tugendhat yesterday, which was very tasty, but lots of different freebies being handed out, and different candidates really trying to put their case across to delegates, all leading up to those big speeches on Wednesday.
Is that normal, all of these sort of freebies, all this merchandise, or have they stepped it up this time around?
Well, the last time there was a leadership contest at at the Conservative Party conference was way back in 2005. Then, of course, I wasn't at Conservative Party conference. I was still at school, but there were freebies handed out then. David Davis famously had T-shirts that says, "It's DD for me." There was a famous picture that went around with two rather busty ladies in the double D T-shirt that did cause a bit of a scandal at that time. But yes, whenever there is one of these conferences that does include a leadership contest, this is a rare thing in British politics, but they're throwing the kitchen sink at it.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'll be using Tom Tugendhat's tan, but perhaps others will. We'll see. Maybe people will be going around looking very orange over the next couple of days. But thank you very much, Tom. We'll check in a little bit later. And please, at home, do get in touch. Post your comments. Visit gbnews.com/yoursay to join the discussion. But let's get to the news headlines with Mark White.
Good afternoon. At 3 minutes past 12, the main headlines from the GB News Centre. A top US lawyer representing a number of Mohammed al-Fayed's alleged victims claims he did use violence against some women who wanted to speak out. Gloria Allred told GB News that the former Harrods owner made it virtually impossible for victims to report his alleged crimes. At least 60 women have now come forward claiming they were sexually assaulted or raped.
He used a series of threats against some of the victims, saying, if you tell anybody, we know where your family lives. If you tell anybody, there'll be consequences for you. If you tell anybody, you'll never work in London again. And also, if you tell anyone, you'll be terminated. And in fact, some of the women resisted his sexual advances, and sometimes he used violence against them.
The BBC has been criticised in a new report for their coverage of the conflict in the Middle East. The report accuses the corporation of anti-Semitism and making false and damaging claims about Israel. BBC management have said they don't recognise the overall characterisation. Former BBC executive Danny Cohen said the corporation was failing in its duty to impartiality.
BBC is a very trusted news source, and it has a commitment to impartiality and a commitment to accuracy. And what this report shows today is that the BBC is consistently and systematically showing bias against Israel and failing in its duty to impartiality.
The Lebanese Prime Minister has said up to 1 million people have been displaced as fighting between Israel and the terror group Hezbollah continues. Overnight, Israeli airstrikes targeted central Beirut for the first time. The terror group, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, said 3 of its leaders were killed in the strikes. Meanwhile, Hamas said its leader in Lebanon has been killed alongside some members of his family in an airstrike overnight in southern Lebanon. Tory leadership contender Kemi Badenoch has defended comments she made over the level of maternity pay, saying her remarks have been misrepresented. It follows an interview in that the Shadow Housing Secretary appeared to suggest the allowance could be seen as excessive. All 3 of her leadership rivals have distanced themselves from those comments, but Ms Badenoch said that she wants an honest campaign.
I've been a Minister for Women and Equalities. I've had 3 children. I've had maternity leave 3 times. I don't need anyone to tell me about maternity pay. I've been one of the people fighting for that, and I won't have my views misrepresented.
Well, speaking to GB News this morning, the Conservative Party chairman said the allowance was not too high.
The Conservative Party was the party that brought in statutory maternity pay, so no, I don't think it's excessive. And I think if you talk to organisations like CBI, they'd say exactly the same thing.
The UK's biggest steelworks is ending production today after more than a century of operations. Blast Furnace 4 is the final furnace operating at Tata Steel's plant in Port Talbot. From today, it'll be shut down, putting around 2,000 people out of work. The works will enter a transition phase for the next 3 years until a new electric arc furnace is installed. The Duke of Sussex is making a rare visit to the UK today to celebrate the achievements and resilience of seriously ill youngsters and their families. Prince Harry will attend the Well Child Awards ceremony in London in his role as the charity's patron, a position he's held for the past 15 years. The King is believed to be spending time at his Balmoral home. It's thought he hasn't seen Harry since the Duke rushed to his father's side after the King's cancer diagnosis in February. The legendary country music singer and actor Kris Kristofferson has died at the age of 88. A family spokesperson said the star passed away peacefully at his home in Hawaii on Saturday. He won 3 Grammys for Best Country Song, Help Me Make It Through the Night, and starred alongside Barbra Streisand in the 1976 film A Star Is Born, for which he won a Golden Globe. And finally, the late Queen and Sir David Attenborough have been named as our greatest British cultural figures. In a survey to mark the 90th anniversary of the British Council, the late monarch was voted the country's greatest cultural icon, with 41% selecting her in the survey. Sir David Attenborough came a close second, with 40% voting for him, followed by Diana, Princess of Wales, former Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and Queen frontman Freddie Mercury. And those are your headlines. We'll have more for you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back. It is now 12:09. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, let's start with what Jeremy Hunt, the Shadow Chancellor, has had to say now, speaking at the Conservative Party conference, because he's hit out at what he calls Labour's lies about their economic inheritance. He chose to take particular aim at his successor, Rachel Reeves. He's described her claims of a £22 billion black hole as simply fictitious. I heard that he also said that there may be some kind of surplus. Let's find out more with GB News political correspondent Catherine Forster, who was at Jeremy Hunt's speech. Catherine, he certainly seems to have stuck the boot in to Labour. What did he say about this financial black hole then?
Yes, he has. I'll come to that in a minute, but just to give you a little look around Birmingham, where we're here for conference, it's chucking it down with rain outside, as indeed it did in Liverpool for Labour. But the mood is not as gloomy as you might expect, despite the fact the Tories were taken down to just 121 seats. They're a bit cheerier than you might expect. But yes, I went a little bit earlier to hear Jeremy Hunt. Remember him until very recently. He was in charge of the nation's finances. Talking about the economy now, he took a very different view to the current Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. We've heard a lot of doom and gloom about the terrible state of the economy, about this supposed £22 billion black hole and the awful choices that Labour is going to have to take as a result of it. Let's take a look at what the former Conservative Chancellor had to say.
I think one of the biggest lies we've had since Labour came to office is this nonsense about having the worst economic inheritance since the Second World War. I note that not a single independent economist has been prepared to come forward and back up Rachel Reeves in that claim. This week's Economist, where there's an article saying that she could actually have not a black hole of 22 billion, but a surplus of 39 billion to play with in the budget. The Financial Times did a Freedom of Information request to the Treasury to ask where this fictitious 22 billion number came back. And the reply they got back from the Treasury was, we can't give you the workings because we're not sure they're accurate.
So Jeremy Hunt also described this black hole as fictitious, and yes, you heard him say that far from the £22 billion black hole, there was potentially, in fact, a £39 billion surplus, depending on the way that all of this is calculated. So he's he's putting a very much more optimistic gloss on the economy, saying that the IMF say we're going to grow faster than France, faster than Germany, faster than Japan, that things are really rather a lot better. But he worries that decisions that Labour are going to make are going to kill potential growth. One other thing he said that I think just worth noting is he talked about the ballooning welfare budget. It has rocketed during COVID. We're paying vast amounts of money out in out-of-work benefits. It's something that the government wants to tackle, but he's saying given the row that's erupted over the means testing of winter fuel payments, he says he worries that welfare reform will become untouchable.
Thank you very much indeed, Catherine Forster. You're there live in Birmingham. There does seem to be a little bit of a buzz, although I've heard reports that apparently there are more lobbyists, journalists and corporate-type people than there are actually Tory members there. But I don't know if that's actually true. That's just what a few people have been saying. But Kemi Badenoch, one of the leadership hopefuls, one of the front-runners, one of the most popular, I would say, out of the four, she's been under fire for comments that she made on maternity pay. She seemed to suggest that it's excessive. Now, I don't know if you've spoken to many young mums recently, but that's certainly not what they tend to say. They certainly say that statutory pay is very low indeed. It's one of the lowest in the OECD. It's given the other Tory leadership hopefuls quite the opportunity to, well, argue against her and prove that they're on the side of the women. Jenrick went straight in there as well. She said her point of view has been misrepresented by the media, but has it? Tom Harwood is in Birmingham for us, and he's joined now by a Conservative MP who is backing Kemi Badenoch to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. That's Shadow Minister for London and Shadow Minister for Justice, Gareth Bacon. Thank you very much indeed. Please do take it away.
Thanks, Emily. Yes, I'm here with Gareth Bacon. And Gareth, you've been backing Kemi since the start. But yesterday, that was a bit of a blunder. At the very least, an ambiguous comment on maternity pay. What was Kemi trying to say?
Well, firstly, I think it's been completely misconstrued, and I think if you watch the entire interview, you can see exactly what she was saying. And what she was doing was talking about the excessive level of regulatory burden that is on businesses. As a former business secretary, she speaks with some authority on that, and she was saying that government, in many cases, needs to get out of the way of business in order to allow them to thrive. And so that's the point that she was making. And in the middle
this was all in the conversation about maternity pay, and she spoke about the excessive regulations, and that is a regulation on business.
Yes, it is. But she was in the middle of talking about regulation on business when the journalist who was interviewing her raised the issue of maternity pay. And Kemi's answer was, that is excessive. She was talking about the regulation on business. She wasn't talking about the level of maternity pay.
Is it illegitimate to say that maternity pay is excessive? I mean, it's lower in the United States of America, it's lower in Australia. Is that an illegitimate point of discussion?
Kemi didn't say that. Kemi said that the level of regulation on business was excessive. And the truth of the matter is, of course, I mean, firstly, Kemi has received maternity pay. She's got 3 young children. But secondly, 92% of the level of statutory maternity pay can be reclaimed by businesses. It's the regulatory burden that is excessive, and that's the point that Kemi was trying to make.
Is there not an issue when you're talking about regulation in the abstract but not the specific? It's very easy to say that our businesses are overburdened with lots of regulation, but it's very difficult for a politician to say businesses should have to pay people who are out of work more, or businesses or less, or businesses should have fewer environmental standards placed upon them, or businesses should have less health and safety. When you get to the specific, it's a lot harder for a politician to then make that case.
Yes, but Kemi wasn't trying to get to the specific. She was setting out in broad strokes what her approach would be to business going forward, which is to try to decrease the regulatory burden. And this is at precisely the time where the new Labour government are looking to massively increase it with their new Employees' Rights Bill, which is going to, talking to businesses yesterday, they are very, very worried that actually what's going to happen is that's going to make it much more difficult to employ people, which is going to be very counterintuitive if this government claims that it wants to secure economic growth, when this will have the reverse impact.
Does this get to a problem, perhaps, with Kemi Badenoch's candidacy, that she is a very, very bright woman, she is really interesting to talk to, and in many ways that conversation was more like a sort of podcast where she was sort of thinking of ideas rather than sticking with the usual line to take. Is it not the case that sometimes in an election campaign you do need to have your line to take? You can't be freewheeling, even if it's an interesting conversation, and some of the other candidates are more on message.
Look, part of the problem about being on message is that you don't answer the question. Kemi is a very straight-talking politician. It's one of the reasons why she resonates so powerfully with people. It's one of the reasons why in every single poll of Conservative Party members, Kemi comes out very clearly in front of the rest of the pack. People like authenticity. They like straight talking. They like being told the truth. And these are the hallmarks of Kemi's campaign. She is setting out her stall to talk to people very directly. To get into the weeds of very detailed policy proposals when you are 4 years minimum away from a general election would be a mistake, wouldn't it? Kemi is talking in broad strokes quite deliberately.
But at the very least, that was an ambiguous conversation. Clearly, some people took from it what Kemi didn't mean, or that she says she didn't mean. That wasn't particularly straight talking. That was more talking cross purposes.
No, she was talking about the level of regulatory burden on businesses. Now, I've seen you do interviews, Tom, where you have told off other people in the commentariat for cherry-picking parts of interviews in order to push their own particular points, and you are quite right in doing that. That is precisely what has happened here. This is being spun because Kemi is the front runner and people would like to take Kemi down. And that's what's going on here. This is the media trying to take something out of context to blow it up to something that clearly is not what Kemi was talking about. And I would encourage people to go and watch the entire interview rather than the clips that are circulating on social media to see precisely what I mean.
And just finally, do you think that it was wrong of the BBC to splash this as one of their biggest stories yesterday?
Yes, but then it's not the first time that I've found the BBC's broadcasting to be slightly skew-whiff.
Well, Gareth Bacon, thank you so much for talking through that issue there. Of course, there's lots going on at this conference. No doubt this won't be the last, perhaps, fringe event or interview that a line is picked up and examined in great detail. More, no doubt, to come over the course of the next 2 days.
Thank you very much indeed to Tom and Gareth Bacon there. Interesting. Do you buy what Gareth Bacon was saying there, that these comments about maternity pay from Kemi Badenoch have just been spun, they've been taken out of context? If you listen to the longer clip, you'll understand exactly what she's talking about. She's talking about how there's too much regulation on business and business is suffering as a result. But she did say though, that maternity pay is excessive and that we need to have more personal responsibility. There was a time when there wasn't any maternity pay, she says, and people were having more babies. Does that sound like someone who's pro more maternity pay for women? Oh, I'm not sure. Anyway, let me know what you think. gbnews.com/your say, should she have the benefit of the doubt. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Does Keir Starmer's Labour Party have a problem with women? Why am I asking? Because Rosie Duffield, Labour MP, she resigned, claiming that the lads are in charge. Does Keir Starmer have a problem with the ladies?
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
One of the most eminent constitutional experts, Sir Vernon Bogdanor, has published his latest book, Making the Weather, 6 Politicians That Changed Modern Britain, covering 3 eminent figures on the left, Nye Bevan, Roy Jenkins and Tony Benn, as well as 3 on the right, Enoch Powell, Keith Joseph and Nigel Farage. We began by discussing the latter, the newly elected Member of Parliament for Clacton and leader of the Reform Party. I started by asking him how Nigel Farage has had such a fundamental effect on British politics.
Well, it's not difficult to underline Nigel Farage's effect. He's partly, perhaps largely, responsible for Brexit, which, whether one's in favour of it or not, is the most consequential foreign policy decision we've made since the war. And he's also, I think, largely responsible for destroying 3 Conservative Prime Ministers, David Cameron, Theresa May and more recently Rishi Sunak. How's he done it? I think the answer's quite simple. He's a brilliant communicator. And that, in a way, is the first task of a politician, to be a communicator. The first task of an academic is to teach and write books. The first task of a politician is to be able to communicate. And sad to say, neither Keir Starmer nor Rishi Sunak, whatever their other virtues, are very good communicators. So I think that's the reason for his success.
And Nigel's always been very good at communicating a complex issue through a simple message. And that has resonated with the people that he's trying to influence.
Absolutely. He speaks to people with language they can understand. He doesn't use language they can't understand, like missions or strategic aims or management speak, which has really taken over both of the major parties, I think, frankly.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 12:23. And yes, after sensationally quitting the Labour Party on Saturday, the MP for Canterbury, Rosie Duffield, she's now launched a scathing attack on the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, claiming he has a problem with women. Yes, speaking on Sunday for the first time as an independent, Duffield claimed that it is very clear that the lads are in charge, referring to Starmer's inner circle, who she says frequently brief against her and other female MPs. Could this be true? Her extraordinary resignation letter are more interested in greed and power, adding she's ashamed of Labour's sleaze, nepotism and avarice that is now off the scale, in her words. Well, does our Prime Minister actually have a problem with women? I mean, the Chancellor is a woman, the Education Secretary is a woman, there are many other women in positions of power within the Cabinet. So can this possibly be true? We're now joined by former Labour MP Lloyd Russell-Moyle. Lloyd, thank you very much indeed. May I just firstly ask where exactly you stand with the Labour Party at the moment?
Well, I continue to try and support this government as much as we can to do the best for this country. So that's where I stand at the moment. But it doesn't mean that I'm without criticism. I've always I've been a member of the Labour Party since Tony Blair, and I've always had a criticism of every single leader, from Jeremy Corbyn to Ed Miliband to Brown and Blair. There are always things that they can do better and more fulfilled. And I think some of Rosie's criticisms, things like on the two-child benefit cap, on things like the winter fuel payments, are quite very legitimate. We know that lots of people have made those criticisms and said, actually, the handling of a number of them, I don't doubt that we've been given an awful economic situation, but the handling of some of them have been particularly dire, and we need to get better. And I hope and I trust that we will.
And Lloyd, when she talks about Keir Starmer having a bit of a woman problem, about how it's the lads in charge, and suggesting that Keir Starmer is much more in tune with the men in the room than the women, even briefing against female MPs, does any of that ring true?
Well, look, I was never a female MP, and so I can't comment from personal experience that ever happened to me. I mean, I know that they briefed against me at times, and they briefed against other male colleagues as well. I do think we have a factional problem in the party, and some people around Keir see it as either in or out, rather than understanding that it's a broad coalition of lots of people. And I think that will come to be a disadvantage in the end, because it's much better to have people who are supportive of the general direction, but are willing to test the ideas out and have the argument internally before you put forward policies. I mean, that makes a policy better in the end. And I'm not sure that some in Keir's team are so keen on that. But I think Keir himself remains a very good man, as he always has been. And I would be surprised if exactly what Rosie says was directed directly by Keir.
Does he get it, though, Keir Starmer? He's refused to apologise over the various freebies, including the quite long-term use, really, of Lord Wahid Ali's penthouse in Covent Garden, and then, of course, the clothes and the football tickets and your concert tickets, etc., etc. Does he get it? Because We've seen that there are new rules coming in, apparently, to try and draw a line under all of this. And those are about when and how you declare these gifts as a minister and as an MP. But is it about when you declare these gifts? Is it about how you declare these gifts? Is that the point?
Well, look, there is a real problem about how you declare some of these gifts, and they need to clear up the rules around that, because at the moment it's totally not working, and it looks dodgy. Personally, if you've already bought a season ticket for your football club, and then the director invites you into the box, you've already paid to get in there and watch the match, but the director has said, come up and have a drink with me. That's the kind of thing the director does with well-known season ticket holders all the time. And it would be bizarre to say, oh no, terribly sorry, I'm not going to come and join you in the director's box, I'm going to sit here in the stands.
Yeah, but you know as well as I do, it's not just the football tickets, that's just one tiny piece of this.
Exactly. So some of it is a bit of riffraff, rubbish, you know, but some of it is serious, you know, kind of spending so much on his glasses, they look the same as mine, and I got mine from Specsavers, so I don't understand. Most people will look at those things and say, well, hang on a second, I buy that out of my own wage, and I buy it from the cheapest shop going, and it works me perfectly well.
But
And
Lloyd,
I think
you've just shown more understanding. You've just shown more understanding of how the public are feeling towards this story than Keir Starmer has at all. It's appeared time and time again, every time he's, you know, being interviewed by the media or whatever, very much on the defensive. I haven't done anything wrong here, nothing to see here. The only thing that he's really said is, OK, I'm not going to take any more clothing donations, but it was perfectly appropriate when I was in opposition and I wanted to get into power and thing. He just doesn't seem to get it. Do you think it's a bit weird, Lloyd, that Lord Wahid Ali is giving so many donations to not just Keir Starmer, but many cabinet ministers and other Labour MPs as well? Why?
Well, usually the complaint is that people are giving donations to try and get influence. I don't think anyone can say Lord Wahid Ali doesn't have influence already, because he's a Labour Lord and he's very close to the inner circles. So I don't think the money that he's giving is to buy influence, which is the usual reason why we say something's wrong. And I suspect
he got a security pass, didn't he? He got a security pass.
Yes, I mean, OK, he got a security card. He's a lord. Most people would expect lords or MPs to be able to go to 10 Downing Street when they need to meet the Prime Minister, if they're on the Prime Minister's team, you know, if they're in the Labour team. But I do think that that most people will look at some of the freebies and the level of them, particularly things like clothes and glasses, particularly things that they normally would buy themselves, and say that doesn't pass the sniff test. And I think it would probably be better to say, look, some of these things, in hindsight, would have been better not to do. No one's done anything wrong, but in hindsight, it would be better not to have done it.
Yeah.
And going forward, let's not make that mistake again. Because what's important is that we get a Labour government that's doing some of the important things that we need to be doing in this country, which is sorting out the NHS, sorting out the education system. And while we're talking about the cut of his suit and whether he's spent some money on a penthouse flat or not, we're not talking about the real issues that matter for people. And it, again, makes them feel like politicians are further distanced from them.
Well, it does open him up to accusations of champagne socialist. You know, you can privilege your son with this, you know, the use of this multi-million-pound penthouse, but you know, parents who want to send their children to private school, no, they need to be taxed more for that. You see, it's all right to pay for privilege for your children if you're Keir Starmer and you're not even paying for it. You're getting it as a freebie, Lloyd.
I think no one has anything wrong with champagne socialists, but everyone should have access to the champagne.
Oh, well, that's all right, yeah.
When it's champagne for me and not for you. Now, I think
well, winter fuel payments is certainly not for pensioners, is it?
Exactly. So we've got to make sure that everyone looks like they're making the difficult and tough choices. And I do think what's more important is that we have a cabinet that doesn't seem that it just has friends and cronies in, which is the other part of Rosie Duffield's critique. And generally, we've got a very good cabinet, but there are some new people that have come in that are the relatives of friends and family, the relatives of Sue Gray, the relatives of Lord Falkner, the relatives of other people that have ended up going straight into the front bench. And I do know that that then causes ripples as well. It might well be that they are very good people, expert people, but if you don't serve your time on the back benches before you get on the front bench, then it doesn't look good. So we need to make sure that we're doing a bit better on these things and getting on to the issues that matter for this country.
I think so, because those favourability polls aren't doing so well at the moment. But Lloyd Russell-Moyle, thank you very much indeed, former Labour MP. Great to speak to you. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Is there bias at the BBC? The broadcaster has been accused of institutional hostility to Israel over its coverage of the conflict in the Middle East. Are they right?
Good afternoon. At 12:32, the latest headlines from the GB News Centre. Former Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has hit out at what he calls Labour's lies about their economic inheritance. Speaking at the Tory party conference, he took particular aim at the new Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, describing her claims of a £22 billion black hole as fictitious.
The biggest lies we've had since Labour came to office is this nonsense about having the worst economic inheritance since the Second World War. I mean, that is a legacy, frankly, that I would have died to have when I became Chancellor. I think the economy's got very solid.
A top US lawyer representing a number of Mohammed al-Fayed's alleged victims claims he did use violence against some women who wanted to speak out. Gloria Allred told GB News that the former Harrods owner made it virtually impossible for victims to report his alleged crimes. At least 60 women have now come forward claiming they were sexually assaulted or raped.
He used a series of threats against some of the victims, saying, if you tell anybody, we know where your family lives. If you tell anybody, there'll be consequences for you. If you tell anybody, you'll never work in London again. And also, if you tell anyone, you'll be terminated. And in fact, some of the women resisted his sexual advances, and sometimes he used violence against them.
The Lebanese Prime Minister has said up to 1 million people have been displaced as fighting between Israel and the terror group Hezbollah continues. Overnight, Israeli airstrikes targeted central Beirut for the first time. The terror group, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, said 3 of its leaders were killed in the strikes. Meanwhile, Hamas said its leader in Lebanon has been killed, along with some members of his family, in an airstrike overnight in southern Lebanon. The Duke of Sussex is making a rare visit to the UK today to celebrate the achievements and resilience of seriously ill youngsters and their families. Prince Harry will attend the Well Child Awards ceremony in London in his role as the charity's patron, a position he's held for more than 15 years. The King is believed to be spending time at his Balmoral home, and it's thought he has not seen Harry since the Duke rushed to his father's side after the King's cancer diagnosis in February. The legendary country music singer and actor Kris Kristofferson has died at the age of 88. A family spokesperson said the star passed away peacefully at his home in Hawaii on Saturday. He won 3 Grammys for Best Country Song, Help Me Make It Through the Night, and starred alongside Barbra Streisand in the 1976 film A Star Is Born, for which he won a Golden Globe. OK, you're right up to date with the latest headlines. I'm back in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Drier weather is on the way eventually, but it stays unsettled at first this week with further heavy rain in places. as the area of low pressure that brought very strong winds and wet weather to the south and west during Sunday tracks across central parts of the UK, bringing a swathe of very wet weather into parts of northern and eastern England and North Wales, as well as parts of eastern Northern Ireland. That's where the heaviest rain will be through these central parts. Risk of further flooding in one or two spots, particularly northeast England. To the south, cloudy with some showery rain into the southwest of England and gusty winds here as well. To the north, well, mostly fine for northern Scotland, although damp for the central belt and into southern Scotland. Further showers to come into the evening across the southwest, drier towards the southeast, but we've still got rain coming down across North Wales, northeast England, into parts of Northern Ireland. So tricky conditions on the roads perhaps at this stage in the day. The central belt into central and northern Scotland, it's brighter and there'll be some clear spells, but also one or two showers and a brisk wind coming in from the east. That wind, though, will be strongest across eastern England as we end the day and go into the start of Tuesday, bringing further wet weather into East Anglia and then eventually into the Midlands as well. That rain will push south. Elsewhere, further west, one or two showers overnight, but lighter winds, some clear spells. And actually a bright start for Northern Ireland and Western Scotland. That's where the best of the sunshine will be during Tuesday morning. It will brighten up across Western England and Wales as well. A few showers here and there. But for Eastern England, that's where we're going to see strong winds and outbreaks of rain continuing through Tuesday, making it feel particularly unpleasant. Highs of 12 or 13 Celsius.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning to you. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. The A1M on the northbound side, Bradbury Junction 60 up to Bowburn 61 is queuing. There's emergency bridge repairs ongoing, so a lane closure in place. Also on the northbound side of the A1, Brampton Hut up towards the A1M at the Alconbury turn-off. Now that's shut, an early collision being recovered, so long delays on the approach there. Elsewhere, the A303 in Wiltshire currently closed between Chicklade for the A350 and the Deptford-Cobford turn-off of the A36, shut both ways for lorry fire. And Falkland in Somerset, Church Street between the Laverton turn-off and Norton St Philip closed at the scene of a collision. That's queuing. And Axminster in Devon, the Chard Road, the A358 blocked by 2nd Avenue. There's flooding there, so no way through between 2nd Avenue and Goldsmith Lane. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is 12:39, and today 3 prominent Jewish groups, the Board of Deputies of British Jews, the Jewish Leadership Council and the Community Security Trust, they've all backed a report saying the BBC's coverage of the Middle East conflict is institutionally hostile to Israel. Now, earlier this morning, GB News spoke to former BBC executive and author of this report. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Writing about it actually in the Daily Telegraph since, pointing out the failures in the BBC's coverage and the impact that's having on the Jewish community. And that ranges from mistakes and very inaccurate reporting to the crucial things that the BBC leaves out. More often than not, the BBC does not describe Hamas or indeed Hezbollah as prescribed terrorist organisations. And often they make mistakes in their reporting that they then do not correct.
Very interesting. Well, we're going to speak to Adam Cherry, I believe, our reporter. No, OK, we're going to be discussing this with Defence and Foreign Affairs editor at The Telegraph, Con Coughlin. Con, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I wonder if you just would have a comment on that report on BBC bias. Is it something that you've noticed? Do you think it's legitimate? I know there have been complaints for a long time about the BBC's failure not to call Hamas and now Hezbollah as well terrorist organisations. That seems to be something that the BBC just decided on its own not to do. But then also errors in actual events that have been reported.
Well, it's a very complex area, to be honest. I mean, I think the BBC does tie itself in knots by not calling groups like Hamas and Hezbollah terrorists. I mean, nothing. Yeah, what Hamas did on October the 7th was an act of mass terrorism, and to try not to describe it as such is ludicrous. And I think you also see with the death of Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah is a terrorist movement, and you look at the way his death has been covered, and it's more like he's some kind of hero. And this is a guy who cut his teeth kidnapping British hostages in Beirut 30-odd years ago. So, they're not doing themselves any favours with this sophistry, in my view.
Why do you think it is that they choose sometimes this editorial stance, if they do, that can be seen as bias against Israel?
Well, I mean, with all due respect, I'm not an expert on the BBC, but I mean, but I think, as I said, they're trying to be impartial. That's the sort of the BBC ethos, and they're pushing impartiality, to my mind, to ludicrous areas. Hezbollah is a terrorist organization. Hamas is a terrorist organization. The people who run it commit acts of terrorism. But, I mean, the BBC got themselves in this mess with the IRA, 30-odd years ago. So it's just the nature of the institution. They're trying to claim the moral high ground, and by so doing, they're getting themselves in a terrible pickle.
Well, let's move on to what actually is going on in the Middle East. That is your expertise.
That's right. That's what I do know about.
Where are we up to in this conflict? We've got Israel at war in Gaza. We've got Israel with an offensive in southern Lebanon. Huge numbers of displaced people on both sides there. You've also got airstrikes, I believe, now in the Yemen against the Houthis. This is very difficult now for Israel. War on three fronts, it seems.
Well, I think the amazing thing is that this tiny little country, I mean, anyone who's been to Israel, and the first thing that strikes you is how small this country is. And they're fighting this war, these wars, on so many fronts now, in Yemen, in Gaza, southern Lebanon, Syria. I think they've even had strikes in Iraq. They've certainly attacked Tehran, where they killed the Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh. And that a small country can undertake this level of military operations is quite formidable. And also their intelligence is fantastic. I mean, they found Ismail Haniyeh, the Hamas leader, in a hotel room in Tehran. They found out where Hassan Nasrallah was staying last week in the southern suburbs of Beirut. I mean, their intelligence is fantastic. But having said all that, they are running an enormous risk of escalating this conflict into a very big Middle Eastern conflict. And the elephant in the room is Iran. Iran sponsors all these groups. Iran will be humiliated that the leaders of both Hamas and Hezbollah have been assassinated by the Israelis, and they'll want to respond in some way. And how they respond could really define the outcome of this conflict.
And Con, just lastly, is the hope on the Israeli side when it comes to Hezbollah in particular, that if they take out these leaders, if they take out all of these senior members of the terror group, that they'll put their hands up and just say we're not going to bombard you anymore. We're not going to try and bombard you. Is that the hope?
Well, that will be the Israeli strategy, just to pummel them into submission. I mean, Hezbollah is not the force it was 2 weeks ago. It's lost not only its leader, all its senior commanders, but having said that, it's a very powerful force. They've got about 100,000 missiles stored in underground tunnels in southern Lebanon, and they could really do some damage to Israel. So I don't think this is over yet, and I think we're all going to be watching very closely what the Israelis do on the ground and whether they do launch a ground offensive, which could really be very provocative for the rest of the region.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much indeed for your time. Con Coughlin, Foreign Affairs Editor at The Telegraph. Great to speak to you. Thank you. We were speaking about potential bias at the BBC. A spokeswoman has said the Israel-Gaza conflict is a polarising and difficult story to cover. And we understand there are a range of views. The BBC is focused on reporting the conflict impartially, bringing audience breaking news, insight and analysis, and reflecting all perspectives. While we do not recognise the overall characterisation of our journalism in this report, we will, of course, always look at anything raised with us with care and attention. Well, there you go. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. We are going to be turning our attention briefly to the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, because he's returned to the UK. Will he meet with his brother and father? Cameron Walker will join me next.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Meghan Markle is finding it very, very difficult to recruit staff for her lifestyle brand, which is called American Riviera Orchard. There's a mouthful for you. Apart from a jam gifted to influencers earlier this year, the brand is yet to launch any products.
Well, let's speak to our US royal and showbiz reporter, Kinsey Schofield. Good morning to you, Kinsey. Who's going to want that gig?
I mean, there are rumors that Netflix has said, allow us to manage the retail strategy. If she can't manage to find a CEO or somebody willing to work with her, Netflix sees an opportunity there.
To be an influencer, people have got to want to be like you. Do people like her?
I mean, this has been her biggest issue in the last few years, is realizing that there's been a shift when it comes to their popularity. Harry and Meghan believed their own hype when they said on that Netflix series that the reason they were ostracized was because they were much more popular than the British royals. They were more popular than Prince William, more popular than Princess Kate. And their popularity has declined immensely. And now they are desperate to win people over again.
Most people have to be liked or admired, and I put it to you, Kinsey, she'll have difficulty on both fronts.
Netflix is not going to renew this contract. I mean, they are fearful that this cooking show, this polo show, will not connect with the audience. And now they want us to believe that Meghan is at home cooking all this banana bread and having her best friend Chrissy Teigen over for scones. People aren't going to buy it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes and Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This Sunday, join me, Camilla Tominey, for an exclusive interview with one of the most controversial, influential and unique political figures of our time. Boris Johnson will be in studio discussing his new memoir, Unleashed, the gripping story of how he dealt with plotting politicians, problematic princes and a pandemic. From Boris bikes to Brexit and everything else in between. This Sunday at 9:30 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, 12:50 is the time. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, Prince Harry is going to be in London today to attend the World Child Charity Awards this evening, but there's no sign of Meghan, as the Duchess is staying at home in California. Now, the King is believed to be spending time at his Balmoral residence, so it doesn't look very likely that there's going to be some kind of father-son reunion. But GB News royal correspondent Karen Walker joins us now. Yes, so Prince Harry is going to be in London. His father is in Scotland. Is Prince William in Windsor?
Yeah, we believe so.
So, you know, are they gonna
Will they, won't they?
Train? Will they, won't they?
Well, that is the million-pound question, Emily, isn't it? I mean, the last time we think Prince Harry saw his father, the King, was in February when the King announced he had cancer, and it was a very short meeting, less than an hour, before the King then flew off to Sandringham. This time, as you say, he's in Balmoral, so the likelihood of, logistically, of the two meeting is quite remote. Prince Harry, his focus, by coming across here to the UK, is the Well Child Awards. It's a charity he's been patron of for 16 years, helping seriously ill children in the UK. He's going to be delivering one of the awards, going to the ceremony and meeting a lot of the recipients and their families. But of course, all the questions are, well, is he going to reconcile with his father? Is he going to reconcile with his brother? The last time he was in the UK was in August for his uncle's memorial service, where he stayed at Ultrup, which is Princess Diana's former childhood home, now owned by Earl Spencer, his other uncle. William also in the same room as him back in August, and yet witnesses inside that room insist that the two of them did not speak. So I suspect it's highly unlikely that Harry and William are going to be meeting each other while Harry's in the UK. You can just see him last year at the World Child Awards.
We saw some briefings to the press about how it was actually Princess Catherine, Princess Kate, who reached out to Harry on his 40th birthday. And they put out that social media post, and there was lots of talk about, you know, why they did that. Does that mean the feud's over? Was it to, you know, show how nice they are, whatever? But yeah, apparently it's Princess Catherine who's been doing all the trying to reach across the divide and...
Yeah, so the 40th birthday post, because it's a milestone birthday, 40 years, that's why the royal social media accounts decided to publish a Happy Birthday Prince Harry message, but it wasn't signed off by Prince William or Catherine, and it wasn't signed off by the King, so it was their team who tweeted out
Well, I heard that it was all Princess Catherine, and that she was... she made this phone call as well to Prince Harry, and also got him this fabulous gift, so I don't know who's been briefing what I read.
Well, what you do need to remember, though, there is no way that their team would have tweeted out the Happy Birthday Prince Harry message without William and Catherine giving the go-ahead.
Right, okay.
So they don't absolutely hate his guts, clearly, because obviously it went out. But it's precedent, because in 2021, although Meghan Markle has stood back as a working member by that point as well, the royal social media accounts also put a happy birthday Meghan Markle when she turned 40. So I suspect next year, when Harry turns 41, we're not going to get a happy birthday message.
We're not going to get a happy birthday message for a 41. It's just not important enough. I can see, you know, 40, you kind of have to put a post out there, even if you're seriously angry with the man. But thank you very much indeed, Cameron Walker, GBNews royal correspondent. Yes, Prince Harry is backing down despite, presumably, all these security concerns as well. Lots of you have been getting in touch about what's been going on at the Conservative Party conference. Joyce says the £22 billion black hole is fictitious, according to Jeremy Hunt. Every Labour MP who thinks it's true should be challenged to listen to Hunt rather than quoting the present Chancellor. Lots of you are very, very sceptical about this financial black hole that we've all been told there is. I'm not sure if Jeremy Hunt was right to suggest that there's some kind of surplus, though. £39 billion surplus, that seems a bit far-fetched as well, considering all the money we spent during COVID. Anyway, we've got lots more coming up on today's show. We are going to be straight back live to Birmingham for the Tory Party conference. We'll see Tom Harwood there as well, of course. But first, let's take a look at the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Drier weather is on the way eventually, but it stays unsettled at first this week with further heavy rain in places, as the area of low pressure that brought very strong winds and wet weather to the south and west during Sunday tracks across central parts of the UK, bringing a swathe of very wet weather into parts of northern and eastern England and North Wales, as well as parts of eastern Northern Ireland. That's where the heaviest rain will be through these central parts. Risk of further flooding in one or two spots, particularly northeast England. To the south, cloudy with some showery rain into the southwest of England and gusty winds here as well. To the north, well, mostly fine for northern Scotland, although damp for the central belt and into southern Scotland. Further showers to come into the evening across the southwest, drier towards the southeast, but we've still got rain coming down across North Wales, northeast England, into parts of Northern Ireland. So tricky conditions on the roads perhaps at this stage in the day. The central belt into central and northern Scotland, it's brighter and There'll be some clear spells, but also 1 or 2 showers and a brisk wind coming in from the east. That wind, though, will be strongest across eastern England as we end the day and go into the start of Tuesday, bringing further wet weather into East Anglia and then eventually into the Midlands as well. That rain will push south. Elsewhere, further west, 1 or 2 showers overnight, but lighter winds, some clear spells. And actually a bright start for Northern Ireland and western Scotland. That's where the best of the sunshine will be during Tuesday morning. It will brighten up across western England and Wales as well. A few showers here and there. But for eastern England, that's where we're going to see strong winds and outbreaks of rain continuing through Tuesday, making it feel particularly unpleasant. Highs of 12 or 13 Celsius.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's still Patrick Christys tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
Richard, you know, the King will probably fly there, I would imagine, with the Queen. You can guarantee they'll have to make a point about offsetting their carbon just to keep that lot happy. They won't use the walkabout term because they'll have to keep the Aboriginal community happy over there. Obviously, they'll be fine that the Queen's face has now been taken off banknotes over there, replaced, I believe, by a member of the Aboriginal community, naturally. You know, you've got all of these tick boxes that the King and the royal family have to do, instead of just maybe, I don't know, leading, being there, being present. Why do they keep bowing down to this stuff?
Well, firstly, as I say, I mean, if you look at the Commonwealth, there are 56 countries. Now, I think that's an enormously important institution, and we benefit in all sorts of ways, as do the other countries who are members of it. Now, if you don't take account, with times changing, by the way, of course, as they did during Queen Elizabeth's reign, if you don't take account of various sensitivities, especially certain pressure groups, I'm not suggesting that we write off our history as being something that's dreadful. There are ups and downs and pluses and minuses, we all know that. But the point is to be sensitive to other cultures, and that is absolutely critical.
What we're seeing in the UK, a lot of these same issues do crop up in Australia, especially with freedom of speech and saying the wrong thing, getting cancelled. I've met with so many people who have personally, like, they've been deplatformed, lost their jobs just for having an opinion, just for potentially saying the wrong thing, and then losing their livelihood as a result. So with Australia, I think particularly this is the trend that we saw from 2020 with the lockdowns, especially in Melbourne, some of the harshest lockdown restrictions in the world. Now, Australia is known as being a country of freedom and liberty. So then I think for many Australians, it was a huge turning point, a big wake-up call.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Monday, the 30th of September. I'm Emily Carver. Now, the Conservative conference, it kicks off again today in Birmingham. Shadow Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, he's accused Labour of lying about the £22 billion financial black hole. Tory leadership candidate Kemi Badenoch, she's under fire for suggesting maternity pay has gone too far, but she says her comments have been misrepresented.
I've been a Minister for Women and Equalities. I've had 3 children. I've had maternity leave 3 times. I don't need anyone to tell me about maternity pay. I've been one of the people fighting for that, and I won't have my views misrepresented.
There you go. What do you make of that? And scandal at Strictly. Giovanni Panice is braced as the long-awaited report into bullying and misconduct is set to be released by the BBC. We'll bring you the very latest as soon as it happens. And does Sir Keir Starmer have a bit of a woman problem? Rosie Duffield resigned as a Labour MP over the weekend, slamming the party for pursuing cruel policies, claiming that the lads are in charge. What's going on? And the government is now attempting to draw a line under Freebie Gate. Ministers are to face new rules over how and when they declare donations of hospitality and gifts and the like. But is this missing the point?
Good afternoon. It's just after 1 o'clock. The main headlines from the GB News Centre. Former Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has hit out at what he calls Labour's lies about their economic inheritance. Speaking at the Tory party conference, He took particular aim at his successor, Rachel Reeves, describing her claims of a £22 billion black hole as fictitious.
The biggest lies we've had since Labour came to office is this nonsense about having the worst economic inheritance since the Second World War. I mean, that is a legacy, frankly, that I would have died to have when I became Chancellor. I think the economy's got very solid.
A top lawyer representing a number of Mohammed Al Fayed's alleged victims claims he did use violence against some women who wanted to speak out. Gloria Allred told GB News that the former Harrods owner made it virtually impossible for victims to report his alleged crimes. At least 60 women have now come forward claiming they were sexually assaulted or raped.
He used a series of threats against some of the victims, saying, if you tell anybody, we know where your family lives. If you tell anybody, there'll be consequences for you. If you tell anybody, you'll never work in London again. And also, if you tell anyone, you'll be terminated. And in fact, some of the women resisted his sexual advances, and sometimes he used violence against them.
The BBC has been criticised in a new report for their coverage of the conflict in the Middle East. The report accuses the corporation of anti-Semitism and making false and damaging claims about Israel. BBC management have said they don't recognise the overall characterisation. Former BBC executive Danny Cohen said the corporation was failing in its duty to impartiality.
BBC is a very trusted news source, and it has a commitment to impartiality and a commitment to accuracy. And what this report shows today is that the BBC is consistently and systematically showing bias against Israel and failing in its duty to impartiality.
The Lebanese Prime Minister has said up to 1 million people have been displaced as fighting between Israel and the terror group Hezbollah continues. Overnight, Israeli airstrikes targeted central Beirut for the first time. The terror group, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, said 3 of its leaders were killed in the strikes. Meanwhile, Hamas said its leader in Lebanon has been killed, along with some members of his family, in an airstrike overnight in southern Lebanon. Well, some breaking news now. The BBC has apologised to former Strictly Come Dancing contestant Amanda Abingdon, saying it had assessed and upheld some, but not all, of her complaints about Giovanni Pernici's behaviour during her time on the show. BBC bosses have upheld 6 out of 17 allegations, some of which are for Giovanni using swear words. Tory leadership contender Kemi Badenoch has defended comments she made over the level of maternity pay, saying her remarks have been misrepresented. It follows an interview in which the shadow housing secretary appeared to suggest the allowance could be seen as excessive. All 3 of her leadership rivals have distanced themselves from those comments, but Ms Badenoch hit back, calling for an honest campaign.
I've been a Minister for Women and Equalities. I've had 3 children. I've had maternity leave 3 times. I don't need anyone to tell me about maternity pay. I've been one of the people fighting for that, and I won't have my views misrepresented.
Well, speaking to the GB News this morning, the Conservative Party chairman said the allowance was not too high.
The Conservative Party was the party that brought in statutory maternity pay, so no, I don't think it's excessive. And I think if you talk to organisations like the CBI, they'd say exactly the same thing.
The Duke of Sussex is making a rare visit to the UK today to celebrate the achievements and resilience of seriously ill youngsters and their families. Prince Harry will attend the Well Child Awards ceremony in London in his role as the charity's patron, a position he's held for more than 15 years. The King is believed to be spending time at his Balmoral residence. It's thought he hasn't seen Harry since the Duke rushed to his father's side after the King's cancer diagnosis in February. The late Queen and Sir David Attenborough have been named our greatest British cultural figures. In a survey to mark the 90th anniversary of the British Council, the late monarch was voted the country's greatest cultural icon, with 41% selecting her in the survey. Sir David Attenborough came a close second, with 40% voting for him, followed by Diana, Princess of Wales, former Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and Queen frontman Freddie Mercury. And those are your headlines for the moment. We'll have more for you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Right, we will be bringing you some more on that BBC report into Strictly Come Dancing and Giovanni Panice's behaviour with the star Amanda Abington. That's been published. We'll be bringing more to you about that in a moment. But we are going to cross over to Birmingham because it is, of course, the Conservative Party conference. And Robert Jenrick, he's setting out his stall, isn't he? He's one of the 4 contenders left. He says the party doesn't have a future unless it campaigns to quit the European Convention of Human Rights. He even said, "Leave or die." That's the message the former immigration minister appeared to channel former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, calling on the Conservative Party to get migration done with a democratic cap on the level of legal migration to the UK. I say, channeled Boris Johnson, perhaps with the rhetoric, not actually with the action. Boris Johnson had quite a liberal policy when it came to immigration. But let's go back to GB News political correspondent Catherine Forster, who's joined at the GB News stand by former Conservative Secretary of State Theresa Villiers. Thank you very much indeed, Catherine. Please do take it away.
Yes, good afternoon, Emily. I'm joined by Theresa Villiers. Thank you for talking to us on GB News this afternoon. You were, of course, MP for Chipping Barnet for nearly 20 years. You were Environment Secretary under Boris Johnson. You had other positions as well. What do you think, in a nutshell, went wrong? And also, you came in 2005, didn't you, when David Cameron surprised everybody by coming in as the outsider and ending up as Tory leader. Could this current contest end up with quite an unexpected result?
It could. I mean, there's one thing you can guarantee from Conservative leadership elections is there are many twists and turns which aren't expected, and particularly with a very small first-round electorate from the MPs, a few changes of mind here and there, and we could see an outcome that people are not expecting at all. So I think there's everything for the 4 candidates to play for. Absolutely no sort of certainties as to who is going to end up top of the pile. But going back to the first part of your question about what went wrong, we lost people's trust and confidence on the economy, and also we ended up with a high tax burden. There were good reasons for that, worst health emergency for 100 years being a primary one, but I think the combination of those things was pretty toxic for us, and that led to the switch to reform, which was so disastrous for our electoral outcome.
Robert Jenrick seems to be of the impression, certainly his team are, that he's going to get to the final 2. He is by far the most sort of hardcore on migration. He's saying that he would, if Prime Minister, go out of the ECHR immediately without a referendum. He's saying that getting migration done is essential, and then that you can move on to other other issues like the economy, the NHS. Where do you stand on that? And can you detach an issue like migration from the NHS and the economy? All these things are interlinked, surely.
Migration was a factor at the general election, clearly, because the Conservative, we promised to limit numbers and they'd gone up significantly. So I can understand why Robert and all the leadership candidates are reflecting on how we put that right. But that was, I think, a fundamental contribution to the lack of trust people had in us at the general election. The solution is difficult. Certainly, Robert is right that the ECHR is causing significant problems in controlling our borders, but leaving it is a very big step. I mean, my view is we should absolutely, before contemplating that step, try to renegotiate it at an international level, because it's not just us that are struggling with the way it's now operating, far beyond the scope of what its original authors would have expected. We'll have to hear from the candidates what they believe the solutions are on that.
Nothing simple, as you say. A crisis across Europe, really, and how to deal with this. Let's talk a bit about Kemi Badenoch. She's also seen as the members' favourite, if she gets that far. She's set the cat among the pigeons yesterday, didn't she, with seeming to suggest that maternity pay was excessive. Now, she says she's been misinterpreted. What do you make of what she said? Because people are not having enough babies. People are struggling to get on the housing market. Is this going to win her favour with younger voters, the sort of attitude that, she said people always used to have more babies before maternity pay even existed?
I was listening to the interview as I was driving up to the conference yesterday, and it was clear that Kemi was making a point about overall business regulation. I don't believe for a moment she was saying that we should cut maternity pay, and clearly that's not her intention, and that's not what she would do if she became leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister in due course. So I think this is, it seems to me to be a bit of a confected row. So I think Kemi's right to just seek to move on from it. And undoubtedly, in the heat of a leadership battle, these things tend to get blown up out of all proportion.
Some people in her team are fearful that the others might sort of conspire to keep her out of the final two, because they believe that if Kemi Badenoch gets to the final two, she's going to win. Are there enough Conservative MPs, are there enough votes to do that sort of dirty tricks, jiggery pokery that Tories have sometimes had a taste for, or do you think that's not going to be an option here?
It is a very Machiavellian electorate. They're certainly capable of shifting votes around for tactical reasons, and I must say, whilst I'm very sad no longer to be MP for Barnet, I'm not sorry that I don't have to be involved in those kinds of difficult choices. But anyone who's thinking of doing that, I think, runs a real risk. One only has to look back to the ill-fated Portillo campaign in 2001. I'm old enough to remember that one. And his supporters supposedly voted tactically, and then he didn't actually get enough votes to come through the eventual ballot. So I hope MPs will vote for the candidate they think will be the best leader and not mess around with these kind of more manipulative approaches to how they cast their vote.
Yes, a couple of votes here or there could potentially have very big implications, couldn't they? Theresa Villiers, thank you so much for talking to us today on GBNews. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Good to be with you.
Catherine Forster and Theresa Villiers there at Birmingham, where the Conservative Party conference is currently taking place. We're going to be catching up with Tom Harwood, who's been out and about, scouring the conference hall, finding out more and more for you about what's going on with that leadership contest. But we do have some breaking news. The BBC has apologised to former Strictly Come Dancing contestant Amanda Abingdon, saying it had assessed and upheld some, but not all of her complaints about Giovanni Panice's behaviour during her time on the show. Now, BBC bosses have upheld 6 out of 17 allegations, some of which are for Giovanni using swear words. But bosses have ruled Mr Panice was not abusive, threatening or intimidating, which is very interesting. They also said there was absolutely no aggressive or physical conduct. OK, well, joining me now from outside the BBC is GB News reporter Adam Cherry. Adam, thank you very much indeed. How did we get here, and what does this report actually say?
So the report says it's a result of a 4-month investigation, Amanda Abingdon being an actress appearing on the series last year with Giovanni Panici, and she accused him of contributing to a toxic workplace, harassment, bullying, both verbally and indeed physically. Although, as you say, this report now finds that the allegations of any physical contact have not been upheld. Nonetheless, they have apologised to Amanda Abingdon. We'll just read you a short part of that statement. At the time, although the production team took steps to address the issues as they understood them, ultimately these were not enough. That is why the measures we have taken to further strengthen our existing protocols are so important. The BBC has already taken extensive steps to enhance our duty of care for everyone on the show. So that has included things like chaperones for the contestants, which have been in place for the new series, which began a couple of weeks ago. And Giovanni Panici no longer works for the UK version of the show, although he has now picked up employment on the Italian version. But nonetheless, an apology to Amanda Abingdon. As you say, 6 of those complaints upheld, mainly to do with swearing and innuendo rather than anything physical. And they said, I'll just read another short segment of it, and they said, we want to apologise to Amanda Abingdon and thank her for coming forward and taking part. We know this would not have been an easy thing to do. So there we are, 4 months, finally, a resolution and an apology.
So hang on, he's been found guilty of essentially swearing and being a little bit intimidatory in that respect, but no physical abuse at all, no threatening behaviour. Is that right? So does that mean that Amanda was lying in some of her accusations? Is that what the suggestion is here?
We'll need to go through the report in full, but at the moment, yeah, it's purely verbal.
Okay.
Describe some of those attacks were described as belittling, so bullying rather than physical intimidation, as was initially claimed.
Okay, but with a new season of BBC Strictly, this is a bit of a cloud over BBC and its flagship programme. Thank you very much indeed, Adam Cherry, for bringing us that. That is that latest bombshell report into this Strictly bullying probe. Now, Tom Harwood is at conference for us. Of course he is, my wonderful co-host. Tom, you're there. You've been chatting away to everyone, finding out what's going on. Tell me, what's the atmosphere like there?
Yes, I'm live on the exhibition floor here in Birmingham, and I have to say it's pretty bloomin' busy. It doesn't really match up with some of the reports we've been reading this morning that this is a thinner conference. I think to some extent there are fewer lobbyists here. Obviously there are. This is now a party in opposition. It's going to be 5 years before this party can get back into government in all likelihood, and they might not even then. But clearly there are party members here who've bought their tickets when this party was in government, and there are some exhibition stalls as well. I'd say a few fewer than at the Labour Party conference, but just as interesting. And what is most interesting, perhaps, is the party candidates, those leadership candidates. They have their stalls. One of the most exciting has been that of Tom Tugendhat. Now, he's a bit of an outsider in the race, but he's got some pretty fun campaign goodies. Guys, can you tell me what are the best puns that the Tom Tugendhat merch stand has?
We've got Tom Tats, which we can do one for you if you want, Tom. We've had Tugendhat, which is unfortunately all gone. In our hack boxes, we had Tugend Boost. We've got the Tugend Totes for our friends who want to be a Tugend Tote. And we've got the Tugend Tarts as well over there.
Do you know what? Can I have a Tugend Tart? A Tom Tugend Tart? Now, this is always dangerous to do on live television, to eat. Do you know what? I might take one bite. Do you know, hold this for me for a second. Emily, I'm going to have a Tugend Tart for you. There's no shortage of puns here at the Tom Tugendhat stall. Oh, no. I don't know quite why I did this, because it is my job to talk. So I'm going to actually let someone else do some talking, because you've got some tattoos there.
We have. Would you like one, Tom?
Would you like one? Let's do a tattoo. Where shall I get this tattoo? On my arm?
On your hand, on your arm.
Great, let's do my hand. Okay, so this is a tattoo of a heart, sort of a classic tattoo, sort of that I might get if I were rather a bit harder than I am. Who's been getting these tattoos? I saw Anne-Marie Trevelyan had one earlier.
Anne-Marie Trevelyan, a fair few journalists have had them as well. A lot of our team have had them. Some of our team have got them on their legs and the necks. They're just everywhere, really.
And you have big waggling fingers as well, these big foam fingers. Have you got any here?
I think we do. It's by my leg. It's by me, Sam. There.
Oh, there we go. Oh, that is tremendous stuff. Here we go. We're having
the big unveiling.
This is the moment of truth. Wow! Look at that. There we go. That is a Tom Tugendhat. And of course, I might sign off for you, Emily, with a waggling finger, if I can grab that. Look at that. I mean, what more do you want at a Conservative Party conference than tattoos, tarts, and even waggling fingers? Back to you.
I mean, I guess it's quite fitting, seeing as your name is Tom. You can get away with the tattoo and the thumb, the finger as well, because it is your name. There you go, Tom. And also, I have a suspicion that Tugendhat was actually a Bakewell tart, but I won't, you know, start a row over it. Tom Harwood, thank you very much indeed. We'll catch up with you later. You are at Birmingham for the party conference for the Conservatives. OK, well, we've got lots more coming up on today's show. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain, of course you are. Asylum seekers caught out. It turns out that a record number of migrants are posing as children and they're being treated more leniently by Border Force. We'll have more on that after the break.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Right, up and down the country, many parents are preparing or have indeed already sent their child off to university.
Indeed, but sometimes it can leave parents struggling to cope with the, quote, empty nest syndrome their child leaves behind. So joining us now to discuss how to cope with sending off your sprogs to university, or not so sprogs, is broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Good morning, Lucy. Nice to see you this early. This is a real thing, isn't it? It's our colleague Paul Coitz, our sports expert, describes it as grief, sending your young adults off to uni and leaving the nest for the first time.
Yes, I think grief is the right word because it's an ending, and it's not just an ending with your relationship with your child. It changes from here on in, but it also is very much about your identity. Your identity as a parent is weakening. You'll always be that child's parent, but you're not going to have the same involvement on a daily basis. And so you're left to think, OK, well, what does my life look like going forward? What's my relationship? If you're in a relationship with a partner, how is that going to change? And like all elements of grief, there's going to be a bit of a process. There's going to be that transition period where you adjust to your new life, just as your sprogs, as you call them, are adjusting to their new, exciting phase of their life.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, one thing that the Conservatives are going to have to get a grip on is the borders if they're going to return to power, because it turns out that a record number of asylum seekers were caught posing as children in the first half of this year. People traffickers are encouraging undocumented individuals to lie to be treated more leniently by the system. Yes, it turns out that more than 1,300 migrants who originally claimed to be minors were later judged to be aged 18 years or over, up until June of this year. This comes as aspiring Royal Marine Tom Roberts was tragically murdered in March 2020 by a 19-year-old asylum seeker who told Border Force he was a 14-year-old child. OK, so do Border Force need to be tougher to protect the British public? Well, we're now joined by former Chief Immigration Officer Kevin Saunders. Kevin, this is quite a shocking number, actually. 1,317 migrants claiming to be minors at the border just in the first half of this year. According to the reports, mostly from Afghanistan, Sudan, Vietnam, Eritrea as well. This is becoming pretty common.
Yes, it is. It's always been a problem. And in fact, you're right that Border Force do tread a little bit lighter around people that claim to be children. Because if we get it wrong, then we're absolutely slaughtered. It's a very, very difficult part of the job. And we do have to rely now a lot more on professionals certainly from Kent Social Services when we're dealing with children or people claiming to be children.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, from your experience, what actually happens? So if someone rocks up, they've come over in a dinghy to Dover, they arrive, they're taken in by the Border Force and everyone there. There's a suspicion that actually they're not a child, even though they're claiming to be a child. Does that happen at the border, or does this come up through the asylum claim process?
No, it will come up initially at the border, and it is difficult. I mean, in my day, I would have to make a decision on whether somebody was a minor or whether they weren't a minor, and that's not an easy thing to do. Now we want to do more things like X-rays and dental examinations, but I'm afraid people are against that as well. So we're stuck. We really are stuck. It is, you wouldn't believe how difficult it actually is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking back to 2018. There was an asylum seeker who claimed to be 15 years old, and he joined a school. He spent 6 weeks as a year 11 student in Ipswich. Fellow pupils asked, "How's there a 30-year-old man in my maths class?" That was reported on the Sky News website back in 2018. I mean, could it actually be that we have... have Border Force got better at this? Have our asylum system got better at judging who is a child and who's an adult? It's quite important for safeguarding other people.
It is, and we are getting better. I mean, I was extremely lucky. When I was working, I had two ladies on my one of my teams who were excellent at working out how old children or people claiming to be children were. And I relied on them heavily for their guidance. And we got it right most of the time. But it is difficult. And we hear stories all the time of people who have slipped through the net, got into schools. There was another one who was over 18 and was chasing young girls.
Yeah, I mean, just lastly... Where are we in terms of the checks? Because I do remember there was a debate around whether there should be checks on teeth or bones or that sort of thing. And a lot of groups thought that was against fundamental civil liberties, human rights, etc. I don't know what the latest is in terms of the technology.
Well, that's what we would like to do. We would like to be able to do that because it gives us much more guidance. But as you say, the left, if you like, are dead against this. They say it's an invasion of privacy and what have you. The trouble is, it's an invasion of privacy until you get until you get a child sexually molested, raped, or murdered. Then we can't win either. So we need to be able to do these examinations of people claiming to be children who are in that sort of category, 15, 16, 17, 18 category that we have doubts about.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you think about borders, I think most people should agree that it's pretty important to know the age of someone who's potentially living in your country. I mean, that seems pretty obvious to most sensible people, I imagine. But thank you very much indeed, Kevin Saunders, former Chief Immigration Officer. Great to get your thoughts on this. That was a record number of asylum seekers are claiming, wrongly, that they are in fact children. Thank you very much indeed. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. We're going to be back at the Tory party conference. Tom Harwood is going to be joined by the leader of the Welsh Conservatives. We'll find out what he has to say next after the headlines.
Well, good afternoon. It's 1:30 and the latest headlines from the GB News Centre. Well, more on that breaking news about the long-awaited report into the BBC and Strictly, and it has apologised to the actress Amanda Abingdon over the allegations that she made. It has upheld some of those allegations, but not all of the allegations that were made by Amanda Abingdon during her time on Strictly Come Dancing. Some of the complaints that were upheld related to Giovanni Pernici, the professional dancer's use of swear words. Well, former Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has hit out at what he calls Labour's lies over the economic inheritance. Speaking at the Tory party conference, he took particular aim at his successor, Rachel Reeves, describing her claims of a £22 billion black hole as fictitious.
The biggest lies we've had since Labour came to office is this nonsense about having the worst economic inheritance since the Second World War. I mean, that is a legacy, frankly, that I would have died to have when I became Chancellor. It's, I think the economy's got very solid.
Former Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has hit out at what he calls Labour's lies about their economic... I've just given you that one, haven't I? Speaking at the Tory party conference, he took particular aim, and we're still on that one. A top US lawyer representing a number of Mohammed Al-Fayed's alleged victims claims he did use violence against some women who wanted to speak out. Gloria Allred told GB News that the former Harrods owner made it virtually impossible for victims to report his alleged crimes. At least 60 women have now come forward claiming they were sexually assaulted or raped.
He used a series of threats against some of the victims, saying, if you tell anybody, we know where your family lives. If you tell anybody, there'll be consequences for you. If you tell anybody, you'll never work in London again. And also, if you tell anyone, you'll be terminated. And in fact, some of the women resisted his sexual advances, and sometimes he used violence against them.
The Lebanese Prime Minister has said up to 1 million people have been displaced as fighting between Israel and the terror group Hezbollah continues. Overnight, Israeli airstrikes targeted central Beirut for the first time. The terror group, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, said 3 of its leaders were killed in the strikes. Meanwhile, Hamas said its leader in Lebanon has been killed, along with some members of his family, in an airstrike overnight in southern Lebanon. The legendary country music singer and actor Chris Christopherson has died at the age of 88. A family spokesperson said the star passed away peacefully at his home in Hawaii on Saturday. He won 3 Grammys for Best Country Song, Help Me Make It Through the Night, and starred alongside Barbara Streisand in the 1976 film A Star Is Born, for which, of course, he won a Golden Globe. Well, there you go. You're right up to date. Here's hoping for a smoother headline sequence in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Drier weather is on the way eventually, but it stays unsettled at first this week with further heavy rain in places. as the area of low pressure that brought very strong winds and wet weather to the south and west during Sunday tracks across central parts of the UK, bringing a swathe of very wet weather into parts of northern and eastern England and North Wales, as well as parts of eastern Northern Ireland. That's where the heaviest rain will be through these central parts. Risk of further flooding in one or two spots, particularly northeast England. To the south, cloudy with some showery rain into the southwest of England and gusty winds here as well. To the north, well, mostly fine for northern Scotland, although damp for the central belt and into southern Scotland. Further showers to come into the evening across the southwest, drier towards the southeast, but we've still got rain coming down across North Wales, northeast England, into parts of Northern Ireland. So tricky conditions on the roads perhaps at this stage in the day. The central belt into central and northern Scotland, it's brighter and there'll be some clear spells, but also one or two showers and a brisk wind coming in from the east. That wind, though, will be strongest across eastern England as we end the day and go into the start of Tuesday, bringing further wet weather into East Anglia and then eventually into the Midlands as well. That rain will push south. Elsewhere, further west, one or two showers overnight, but lighter winds, some clear spells. And actually a bright start for Northern Ireland and Western Scotland. That's where the best of the sunshine will be during Tuesday morning. It will brighten up across Western England and Wales as well. A few showers here and there. But for Eastern England, that's where we're going to see strong winds and outbreaks of rain continuing through Tuesday, making it feel particularly unpleasant. Highs of 12 or 13 Celsius.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. The northbound A1M between Bradbury Junction 60 and Boburn at 61 still queuing. There's emergency bridge repairs continuing and lane closed there. Now, Millbank in North Yorkshire, the A174 in Carlin Howe is closed between Beach Road and Skilling Grove Road for emergency repairs. That's slow. Braintree, Essex, the westbound A120 blocked from the Marks Farm roundabout towards Gaddy's Corner. There's flooding there, no way through, naturally causing queues. There's a 4-mile tailback on the anti-clock M25 from the Clackett Lane services towards the M26 at 5 in the roadworks, so the traffic being held to sort a collision out. And the A303 in Wiltshire closed both ways between Chicklade for the A350 and the Deptford-Codford turn off the A36. There's a lorry fire, it's closed and it's causing queues.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
OK, well, it's 1:38. Good afternoon, Britain. And one of the many topics of conversation at the Conservative Party conference will be how the party manages to rebuild in Wales. They, of course, lost all 12 of their Welsh MPs in July's general election. Now, the leader of the Welsh Conservatives is with Tom Harwood now to tell us exactly how he plans to do that, how he intends to try all of that support in Wales. Tom, please do take it away.
Oh, sorry, yes, that's right, Emily. I'm here with Andrew R.T. Davies, the leader of the Welsh Conservatives. And Andrew, the Conservatives lost every single Welsh MP at the last general election. What went wrong?
Well, sadly, we didn't return any Conservative MPs, but we did come second in the popular vote. There are no prizes for coming second in the popular vote, as we've seen with no MPs, but that gives us a good platform to rebuild on. And on Thursday, for example, of last week, there was a council by-election in the town of Rhyl, a county council by-election. Labour held that ward with 50% of the popular vote last time it was contested in 2022. We took that ward on Thursday with a Conservative councillor for the very first time. So we're learning the lessons from the message that the public sent us on July the 4th. We don't underestimate the challenge ahead for us, but we're enthused about the 2026 Senedd elections, and we're going to work night and day to win those Senedd elections and reflect on the message that the electorate sent us on July the 4th.
Why is it that Wales is the only constituent part of Great Britain that doesn't have any Tories? There are Tories in Scotland, there are Tories in England. Why not Wales?
Well, sadly, not enough people voted for us in those constituencies. It's a simple equation. election. But we got between 17 and 18% of the popular vote, and sadly we didn't get any MPs. In Scotland, our colleagues got 12% of the popular vote, but returned 5 MPs. And because their vote was concentrated, they got their MPs, and I wish that they got more as well, and I'm sure they do. We, as I said, have listened. We have learned the lessons sent to us on July the 4th. And as I said, that council by-election of last Thursday in a constituency of the Vale of Clwyd in Rhyl, the town, where we won that by-election, shows that the green shoots are there. We need to nurture those green shoots and build positively and proactively so that people look at us as the party of change in Wales.
Now, of course, you lead the Conservatives in the Senedd, and the Senedd is electing MSs on a much more proportional system than Westminster elects MPs. Does that mean, by your logic, given that it's more proportional, you got more votes than the Scottish Tories did, surely you should do better at the Senedd elections?
Well, we had a great 2021 election where we returned a record number of MSs to Cardiff Bay, and if you look at the profile of the group I have the privilege to lead, it is by far the youngest group in the Senedd, and also it is also the only group that has 2 Muslim members in there as well. So looking at the makeup of the group, we're the most diverse group, and importantly, we want to be in government come 2026.
But the polls aren't looking good. Come 2026, it looks like you could fall down to 4th place. Your vote is being eaten into by Reform, which seems to be rising in Wales.
Well, I don't see that at all. I see it taking this positive message, building on the strong message that the electorate sent us on July the 4th, which was you need to shape up and make sure you speak to us and are you a united party, and we are a united party working night and day for the people of Wales. If you had Conservative MPs in Westminster and a Conservative government, we wouldn't see the cruel policy of the withdrawal of the winter fuel allowance for pensioners, for example, where in Wales 400,000 households are going to lose that benefit at a cost of £110 million. Labour's own figures say across the UK there could be 4,000 premature deaths. We wouldn't have implemented that, but yet people voted for Labour MPs who actually voted for it. So it's important that you get Welsh Conservative MPs back and you get Welsh Conservative MSs back to make that difference.
We've reported on the chaos in the Welsh Labour Party quite a bit, the defenestration of their leader lasting a little longer than a lettuce. But clearly, ever since devolution was instituted in Wales, there has only ever been a Labour First Minister in Wales. Despite the low growth, high taxes, low unemployment, disastrous NHS, people still continue to vote for the Labour Party in Wales. Does that not say that your party isn't doing enough, isn't professional enough, isn't getting your message across well enough? People keep voting for this party that the Conservatives in Westminster always point to as an example of how not to govern.
And that's a fair criticism, because whilst we've been growing at Senedd elections, and as I said, the 2021 Senedd election was the most successful that we'd fought, we still didn't break Labour's stranglehold on Wales. But it's a stranglehold that's supported by Plaid Cymru and the Liberal Democrats, who give them that majority to vote in a government in Wales. Now, we've had 20 miles per hour speed limits in Wales, which has infused people to actually look at what the Senedd does in their name, because they've been so angered by that policy. We've seen the winter fuel allowance taken away from our pensioners, and importantly, the Labour Party, along with Plaid Cymru and the Liberal Democrats, and indeed supported by Reform, want to create 36 more politicians in Cardiff Bay at a cost of £120 million. We're the only party that voted not to have that to happen, and we want that £120 million to pay for more nurses, doctors and teachers in our schools, and if you did that, you'd have 650 more nurses on the wards of Wales.
Now, we don't have much time at all, but in a sentence, if you would, a comment on those job losses in Port Talbot.
Cruel. Terribly cruel, because Port Talbot is a steel-making town, and ultimately when you see Tata building blast furnaces in India and they're shutting the blast furnaces in Port Talbot, there's many workers wanting a political party to stand up for them. We're doing that as Welsh Conservatives, and we'll continue to do that, but it is the Conservatives who've delivered the money for arc furnaces, so steel-making will continue in Port Talbot, but it's a cruel blow for the town of Port Talbot today that blast furnace is shutting.
Well, Andrew R.T. Davies, the leader of the Welsh Conservatives, really appreciate your time here on Good Afternoon Britain. Emily, back to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Tom Harwood there in Birmingham. I should say that at about 2 o'clock, our very own Christopher Hope is going to be hosting Q&A Q&A sessions with members and people at the Conservative Party conference for Tom Tugendhat and Kemi Badenoch. So we're going to dip into that a little bit in the final hour of the show, and Martin Daubney will pick up as well. I also want to let you know Liz Truss has been opening her mouth and making waves at the Tory Party conference. I'll reveal exactly what she said after the break.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Many happy memories, and 9 in 10 Brits say certain foods evoke feelings of childhood nostalgia, with the mousse-like powdered dessert, Angel Delight, the most loved. Joining us now...
Surprised by that.
Yeah, what, Angel Delight?
I'm surprised it's number one. Yes, very surprised. Well, to talk us through all of this is creator of the Crazy Sexy Food podcast, Hannah Harley-Young. Morning.
Hi.
I've brought a selection of things that really define my childhood, particularly the Viennetta ice cream. And I have brought you some butterscotch Angel Delight. Yay! I'm going to expose myself live on camera and say that I've never tried Angel Delight.
Hannah?
I know. I don't know what that says about me. I thought that was apple puree, actually. I'm so excited. Is it good?
Oh, my goodness.
Did I make it okay?
Oh, yeah. But to be fair, Hannah, it's not that hard to make.
Well, what is it, though? That's what's so funny about Angel Delight. It's chemicals. It's just chemicals in a bag. I mean, it's a load of additives, which, I mean, one thing that's also really interesting about all these nostalgic foods when you look at them is that a lot of things have been discontinued over the years. Oh, dear. So it makes you wonder, how did this one kind of get through the cracks? Angel Delight came out number one, didn't it? It did come out as number one. And also sort of in the top 5 was fish and chips, something I still eat today. Fish fingers, still a staple of my diet. Mr. Whippy, in that same survey, they said that 95% of people find that a taste from their childhood will take them back more than looking at a photo. And that's something that's really interesting for me, and it's the basis of everything that I do, and the reason really why I set up Crazy Sexy Food, or one of the reasons, should I say, was that I love this concept of memories of food. You know, I've interviewed hundreds of people over the past 5 years, and when I get to that question, you actually see their face relaxing, and there's something that it evokes emotion.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. It is now 1:49, and I will reveal what Liz Truss has been saying about some of her colleagues. But we're going to turn our attention to this BBC report into Strictly Come Dancing. It says it's assessed and upheld some, but not all, of complaints made by Amanda Abingdon, one of the contestants on the show, about Giovanni Panici's behaviour during her time on the show. Now, BBC bosses have upheld 6 out of 17 allegations, some of which are for Giovanni using swear words. But bosses have ruled Mr Panici was not abusive, threatening or intimidating. They also said there was no aggressive or physical contact. So let's make sense of this. Joining me now from outside the BBC is GB News reporter Adam Cherry. Adam, I understand we've had statements from both sides on this. Both appear to say that they've been vindicated. So who has been vindicated here?
Well, I'll read the statements first, and perhaps viewers can make up their own mind. So this is first from Giovanni Panici, the dancer. His spokesperson says, "We are pleased that this 6-month review has not found any evidence of threatening or abusive behaviour by Giovanni." Now, I'll just interrupt and say, of course, that they did find 6 allegations were upheld regarding threatening language or belittling language, as is described in the report. Nonetheless, the spokesperson goes on, Giovanni is relieved that the overwhelming majority of allegations out to the BBC have not not been upheld, and looks forward to continuing his work on Dancing with the Stars in Italy this season. So he has, of course, left the British version of the show, but is now doing the same thing over in Italy. Meanwhile, Amanda Abbington has released a statement herself. She says, despite the vile abuse she received from certain members of the public by coming forward, so she claims, I've never regretted coming forward, and today's apology from the BBC is a vindication of my complaint. It's not just a vindication for me, it's a vindication for the other people who have contacted me since I made my complaint to express my concern. So both trying to claim victory here. As we said, 6 of those 17 complaints upheld, but most of them thrown out. The only ones that are upheld were those over sort of threatening or belittling language, as I say. So an interesting one.
Yeah, very interesting. Thanks very much, Adam Cherry, outside the BBC. We're going to speak to showbiz reporter Stephanie Tecci. Stephanie, thank you very much. I can't be the only one that's a little bit confused. Both appear to be claiming victory. Both are vindicated. So where exactly are we?
You're right, confused is the right word, Emily, because it's not been a clear victory for either Amanda Abbington or Giovanni Panice. For him, out of the 17 allegations that were made against him, 6 have been upheld. But the BBC have said they did not find that he was guilty of threatening behaviour, bullying or sexual harassment. So in that sense, yes, he's been cleared of the major allegations that were against him, but there's still things, minor things such as him swearing. For Amanda Abbington now, she hasn't come out to say, you know what, this was a clear victory for her, but instead I think she's been satisfied that the BBC have been forced to apologise, that she did experience something on Strictly. She sees it as a victory in the sense that now past contestants, future contestants, she set up this climate now where if people do want to complain against their dancer, they can. So in her eyes, that has been a victory.
I mean, Stephanie, I don't know if you know, but had she actually accused him of physical abuse in any way?
There were bits where she said he crossed the line in terms of when they were dancing together. She also accused him of sending an inappropriate video, which she deemed quite sexual, which the BBC have now come out and said, actually, that was just banter, joke, workplace banter between the two. So I think the kind of escalation she was hoping for in these allegations hasn't actually come to fruition.
And Stephanie, the BBC has quite a lot of scandal going on at the moment. I know there's a new Strictly Come Dancing series at the moment. Was the first one this weekend? I'm not sure. Sorry, I'm not on top of these types of things. But is there a bit of a cloud over the show, or are things going on as normal?
There has been a cloud over the show because, you know, despite these findings now, it hasn't been put to bed. The show has been forever tainted and scarred. And this series now, we're seeing that chaperones have to be involved in the training sessions. There's a welfare producer for both the dancers and the celebrity contestants. So Strictly now, you know, people kind of see the truth behind it, that it can get intense in these training sessions, and that celebrities, some of them are finding it that it's affecting their mental health. So I think from some of the people I've spoken to who are taking part in the show, they found it quite a kind of difficult series to be a part of this year.
Yeah, maybe people don't realise just how tough it is doing some of these shows. Thank you very much indeed, Stephanie Tecci. Great to speak to you, as always. Right, we've got lots more coming up on the show. At the top of the hour, we are going to be seeing Christopher Hope. He's hosting a Q&A at the Conservative Party conference with Tom Tugendhat, and then Kemi Badenoch will check in after the break.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Cloudy for many of us during the rest of today, with further heavy rain across some central parts of the UK. Showers in the far north and the far south, away from the centre of this area of low pressure, which is slowly moving east. But on the northern flank of this low, that's where we've got this band of heavy and persistent rain across northern England, in particular Yorkshire and Lincolnshire during the evening. Could cause some issues, and that rain band slowly sinks south to bring further wet weather into those areas that were so badly affected by rain last week. So that's the Midlands, parts of East Anglia. Now that rain's moving through, but showers elsewhere across the country, some clear spells in the west And here temperatures will dip into the single figures. But it'll be a bright start to the day across Northern Ireland, the far southwest, so Cornwall seeing some sunny spells, albeit with some showers moving into parts of the southwest. Wales also a lot of cloud around, but a few showers as well. Now for northwest England, western Scotland and Northern Ireland, that's where the clearest skies will be first thing. Plenty of sunshine on offer. And just a few showers pushing into the northeast of Scotland, interspersed by some brighter weather. And a brisk wind continues across eastern England in particular, and that east coast of the UK will see a lot of thick and low cloud through the day and further spells of rain, some of that rain moving into the Midlands at times, but it's going to be less heavy. It's just going to add to what will feel like a dreary day in the east and across central parts of England. Brighter skies to the west, highs of 17 Celsius in the southwest where we get some sunshine. Otherwise it's going to feel on the cool side with the brisk northeasterly breeze, certainly feeling cool and unpleasant in the east and across some parts of central England. But the weather is cheering up through Thursday and Friday. Plenty of sunny spells emerge, particularly towards the northwest.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We love luck.
This Sunday, join me, Camilla Tominey, for an exclusive interview with one of the most controversial, influential and unique political figures of our time. Boris Johnson will be in studio discussing his new memoir, Unleashed, the gripping story of how he dealt with plotting politicians, problematic princes and a pandemic. From Boris bikes to Brexit and everything else in between. This Sunday at 9:30 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes and Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Monday, the 30th of September. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood, live from the Conservative Party conference.
Yes, and that conference kicked off today in Birmingham. Shadow Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, he's accused Labour of lying about the £22 billion financial black hole. Tory leadership candidate Kemi Badenoch, she's under fire for suggesting maternity pay has gone too far. Our political editor Christopher Hope is going to be asking questions in just a few moments. We will tune into that as we get it. And scandal at Strictly. Giovanni Panici at the centre of attention as the long-awaited report into bullying and misconduct has been released by the BBC. The bombshell report comes weeks after the new Strictly season kicked off without Giovanni. We'll be live outside Broadcasting House with the latest. And does Sir Keir Starmer have a bit of a woman problem in his party? Well, Rosie Duffield thinks so. She resigned as a Labour MP over the weekend. She slammed the party for pursuing cruel policies and claimed the lads are in charge. And bad news for most of us. Heavy rain is set to continue as the Met Office issues 2 fresh weather warnings for heavy rain across some parts of the UK. Could there be even more flooding? And are you being affected? OK, well, Tom, I've just been reading. Liz Truss, she's been making headlines again. She's saying too many Conservatives are went woke to try and win votes and it didn't work, and they're all far too progressive and fuddy-duddy. What's all this about?
Yes, Liz Truss is here today, but she is actually jetting off to Australia a little bit later this week. So this is the only day that she is really a presence here at this conference. She was in conversation with the Telegraph's Tim Stanley at a very well-attended event a little bit earlier on today. And I have to say, as she came out of that event, there was a throng of journalists and party members around her, a real sort of centre of action here at this conference. And perhaps that's because Rishi Sunak is no longer here. He went back last night after making his one and only speech at this conference. So the conference is looking for other sort of focal points. Now, of course, some of those are the people campaigning to become Conservative Party leader, but the former Prime Minister Liz Truss speaking at that event and making her way through this conference was clearly a big focal point too, still making waves even after losing office and losing her seat.
Well, she probably still has her fans there at the Tory party conference. I'm sure people who thought perhaps she was the one that got away, others not so much. But yes, Rishi Sunak leaving after just one speech. That's very interesting. He wants to leave the floor, presumably, for the Tory contenders or something like that. We are going to be checking in with Christopher Hope, who's going to be hosting these big Q&As for the Tory leadership hopefuls. But for now, thank you very much indeed, Tom Harwood. Please, at home, get in touch with us, gbnews.com/your say. Please do. But let's get the headlines with Mark White.
Good afternoon. It's 2:03. The latest headlines from the GB News Centre. The BBC has apologised to former Strictly Come Dancing contestant Amanda Abbington, saying it had assessed and upheld some, but not all, of her complaints about Giovanni Pernice's behaviour during her time on the show. BBC management have upheld 6 out of 17 allegations, some of which are for the professional dancer's use of swear words. Well, in a statement this afternoon, Mr Pernice said he was pleased the BBC had not found any evidence of threatening or abusive behaviour by him. Former Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has hit out at what he calls Labour's lies about their economic inheritance. Speaking at the Tory party conference, he took particular aim at the new Chancellor Rachel Reeves, describing her claims of a £22 billion black hole as fictitious.
The biggest lies we've had since Labour came to office is this nonsense about having the worst economic inheritance since the Second World War. I mean, that is a legacy, frankly, that I would have died to have when I became Chancellor. I think the economy's got very solid.
Tory leadership contender Kemi Badenoch has defended comments she made over the level of maternity pay, saying her remarks have been misrepresented. It follows an interview in which the Shadow Housing Secretary appeared to suggest the allowance could be seen as excessive. All 3 of her leadership rivals have distanced themselves from those comments, but Ms Badenoch hit back, calling for an honest campaign.
Minister for Women and Equalities. I've had 3 children. I've had maternity leave 3 times. I don't need anyone to tell me about maternity pay. I've been one of the people fighting for that, and I won't have my views misrepresented.
A top lawyer representing a number of Mohammed Al-Fayed's alleged victims claims he did use violence against some women who wanted to speak out. Gloria Allred told GB News that the former Harrods owner made it virtually impossible for victims to report his alleged crimes. At least 60 women have now come forward claiming they were sexually assaulted or raped.
He used a series of threats against some of the victims, saying, if you tell anybody, we know where your family lives. If you tell anybody, there'll be consequences for you. If you tell anybody, you'll never work in London again. And also, if you tell anyone, you'll be terminated. And in fact, some of the women resisted his sexual advances, and sometimes he used violence against them.
The BBC has been criticised in a new report for their coverage of the conflict in the Middle East. The report accuses the corporation of anti-Semitism and making false and damaging claims about Israel. BBC management have said they don't recognise the overall characterisation. Former BBC executive Danny Cohen said the corporation was failing in its duty to impartiality.
BBC is a very trusted news source and it has a commitment to impartiality and a commitment to accuracy. And what this report shows today is that the BBC is consistently and systematically showing bias against Israel and failing in its duty to impartiality.
The Lebanese Prime Minister has said up to 1 million people have now been displaced as fighting between Israel and the terror group Hezbollah continues. Overnight, Israeli airstrikes targeted central Beirut for the first time. The UK government has now confirmed this afternoon that it secured more seats on commercial aircraft and is again calling on British nationals to leave Lebanon. The Duke of Sussex is making a rare visit to the UK today to celebrate the achievements and resilience of seriously ill youngsters and their families. Prince Harry will attend the Well Child Awards ceremony in London in his role as the charity's patron, a position he's held for more than 15 years. The King is believed to be spending time at his Balmoral residence. It's thought he hasn't seen Harry since the Duke rushed to his father's side after the King's cancer diagnosis in February. Well, the late Queen and Sir David Attenborough have been named our greatest British cultural figures. In a survey to mark the 90th anniversary of the British Council, the late monarch was voted the country's greatest cultural icon, with 41% selecting her in the survey. Sir David Attenborough came a close second, with 40% voting for him, followed by Diana, Princess of Wales, and former Prime Minister Winston Churchill. And those are the headlines for the moment. We're back with more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
OK, welcome back. It is now 2:09, and of course there are 4 leadership hopefuls for the Conservative Party. Kemi Badenoch, James Cleverly, Tom Tugendhat, and who's the other one? Robert Jenrick, of course. Let's go back to Tom Harwood, who is going to be joined by a Conservative MP for Bridgwater, Sir Ashley Fox. Is there a feeling at the conference that there's one man or woman who's going to nab this, or is it all to play for? Are people going around with badges showing who they support?
Trinkets, lanyards, you name it. But of course, it does seem like it's a pretty open race. You ask 5 different people who you think are going to be in that final 2, you'll probably get 10 to 15 different answers. But I'm delighted to be joined here by Sir Ashley Fox, Conservative MP for Bridgwater, of course, newly elected in the last election. You were one of the lucky ones. But you're backing James Cleverly. Why?
Yes. So I think he's the person best able to unite the Conservative Party and to lead us to victory. Why did we lose the last election? Well, we were disunited, we weren't listening to the people, and we didn't deliver on the things we said we would. And I think James is the best person to put that right.
Now, James Cleverly's candidacy stayed still in the last 2 numbers of rounds of MPs voting. Everyone else went up by a bit, but there's been some stagnation there in terms of the momentum. Why was that?
I don't think that matters. What matters is getting him through to the next round, and I think we'll do that. At each stage, different MPs might vote for different candidates for different reasons to see who they want to put through. So we're down to 4. And after conference, we narrow that down to 3 and then down to 2. And I'm going to help James do that by putting forward the positive reasons why he should be our next leader.
And what are those positive reasons?
So, as I said, he's the person best able to unite the party, but he also knows how our party works. He was our party chairman during the 2019 general election. That was a very successful election. And he's also got heavyweight government experience. He's been Foreign Secretary and he's been Home Secretary. He's not only a safe pair of hands in these troubled times, but he's also charismatic, he's a great media presenter, and he knows how to communicate with people.
He is a lovely guy, and everyone says he's one of the nicest people in politics. But when he was Home Secretary, migration skyrocketed. How does he defend that record?
Well, he was Home Secretary for just over a year. I don't think he was entirely responsible for that. But look, as a Conservative Party, we messed up. We allowed immigration to get too high. We introduced that points-based system, copying Australia. That's right in principle, but we then set those points too low. We allowed too many people to go in, and although we took corrective measures, they were too little and they were too late. So I think that's a lesson learned for us. I'm sure that's something James would acknowledge.
Now, people say that James is the underdog in this race. Of course, it looks like, and has looked like, the two front runners have been Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch. What do you make of the news around Kemi Badenoch's comments yesterday? And what does the James Cleverly campaign sort of say to that?
So if you want to ask about the Kemi campaign, you ask Kemi. My job is to talk about James's campaign. And what I would say is we've got 4 candidates and all of them would make a good leader. We have no Jeremy Corbyn. We have no one that's mad and no one that's dangerous to our country. So whoever is leader, I shall happily support them. My judgment is James is the best candidate.
Is this all too softly? Where's the proper punch-up in politics? In leadership elections of past, there has been far more blue on blue. There is, of course, this strange yellow card system in this race, which means that everyone is tiptoeing around and trying to pull their punches. Is that healthy for democracy?
Look, I think it's healthy that the 4 candidates make a positive case as to why their man or woman should be leader. But what we don't need is blue on blue attacks. We've had enough of that in the last 5 years. So I would say I'm only going to make a positive case for James, let the other candidates do the same. Ultimately, the party members will make their choice and I will live with whatever the result is.
OK, let's dive into some of that positive campaign now then. James Cleverly says he wants to cut taxes and increase spending on defence. Wasn't there recently a Conservative Prime Minister who tried to increase spending massively while cutting taxes massively? And didn't the markets have something to say about that?
Well, look, at the moment we're setting out the broad principles of how we would govern. And I would agree with James that our taxes are too high and our spending on defence is too low. But it's another 3 or 4 years before we have to write a manifesto. So I think we should steer clear of specific policies. That's the best thing to do until we're faced with an election, and then we'll make the right judgments. But I think James's approach in setting out broad principles is correct.
Well, Ashley Fox, thank you so much for joining us here on GB News. Back to you, Emily.
Conservative MP for Bridgewater, Sir Ashley Fox. Very interesting indeed. Now, we're going to be crossing live to the conference hall because our very own Christopher Hope, political editor, is interviewing with a bit of a Q&A format for members and people who are attending the conference to get to know some of the leadership hopefuls. He's first off with Tom Tugendhat. Should we drop in and have a little look?
It's great fun. Look, this is, if you're somebody who likes conservative ideas, if you like the Conservative family, if you're a Conservative, you're cool. This is fun. I know it's an odd thing to say, but I enjoy conference. I get to meet old friends and make new ones, and that's great.
And why do you want to be Tory leader? What was the moment when you were looking in the mirror having a shave and thought, hang on, he could run the country?
Well, look, for me, my entire life has been about public service. I mean, just as you've been somebody who's asked questions, I've been somebody who tries to answer them. I've spent 25 years serving our country in different ways. I've served on operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, as you know, and I've fought our country's battles quite literally personally. I've been in Parliament, standing up against the dictators and tyrants that at the time some people thought were friends, but we now know to be exactly who they are, Putin and Xi and the Ayatollah. Call them all out. Got me sanctioned, as you know, for the privilege, but I think it's important. Well, I'm sanctioned by Russia, I'm sanctioned by China, I'm sanctioned by Iran, I'm working on North Korea, I'm working on Venezuela.
Okay.
And then, of course, I was in cabinet. I was in charge of our security, and you'll understand there's a lot I'm not going to tell you about that.
Yes, I'll ask you.
You're welcome to ask, but I promised to keep the King's secrets, and I will. During that job, I was responsible for a huge number of elements that I'm really sorry I can't talk about, but I can give you some proof points. And that's, while I was security minister in those 2 years, we arrested and charged more Russian and Chinese agents than in the previous decade. Mm-hmm. Conservative leadership matters.
Okay. You've got a young family. Do they mind what you're up to, what Dad's up to? You keep trying to be the leader of the Tory party. You tried in 2022. You're trying again.
Well, they mind the fact that I'm not at home, and my boy loves sword fighting, and he minds the fact that I'm not currently having a sword fight with him, with his swords, and my daughter minds the fact that I'm not always at her ballet recital. I know this is something we share, yes. Is the fact that our daughters are both very, very keen ballerinas. Yours rather more professionally than mine. Don't tell her I said that, please. But my daughter is only 7, so I think she could.
Okay.
But, you know, of course they mind, but I'm very proud of them, and they're extremely supportive of me, and my wife is unbelievably generous in letting me come away for days like this and taking on the responsibility.
You mentioned your service. You know, obviously, congratulations on your service. 2003-2013 in the British Army, Lieutenant Colonel. When you stopped doing that work, you served in Iraq and Afghanistan. What did you learn from that service about being a leader, but being maybe even Prime Minister?
Well, look, I mean, many people learned a lot of things in Westminster, and their experiences, of course, important. I learned what I know about leadership in combat in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I learnt it by working with one of the most impressive people I've ever had the privilege to serve, and that's General the Lord Richards, who was, at the time, he was Chief of the Defence Staff, I was his military assistant. We had the responsibility, or he had the responsibility, I had the responsibility of supporting him, of making sure that our operations around the world were delivering in order to protect the British people. And, you know, that sense of service, that sense of duty, that sense of protecting Britain from all threats is something that is absolutely at the core of who I am, because you've got to decide who you are and whose side you're on, and I have always been on the side of the British people. I've never wavered in my absolute commitment to keeping our country safe and keeping our people safe.
Okay. And just a quick question, were you a spy?
I was a uniformed intelligence officer.
Okay, because the internet says things about you.
The internet says many things.
You backed Liz Truss in 2022 to be leader. You regret that?
Look, I stood because I thought that I had the best answers to the challenges that we faced at the time, and I liked when I was knocked out, sadly, before you guys got a chance to vote, but there we go. I got the choice between two people, and one of them was talking about growth, and many of us were inspired by that message. I think we were disappointed by the failure to deliver.
Okay. And you're loyal? There's rumours that you were trying to be leader last year.
No.
No, you weren't doing any fundraising or any work behind the scenes. You're loyal to the leader. And
I have been absolutely clear that when I'm in a government, I serve that government.
If you don't get this time, you'll be as loyal as you have been in the past in the future. Okay. What's your conservatism? I mean, are you centre-left in this party? Are you a wet, to use that Thatcherite term?
Chris, this is one of those questions that really comes up using the language of the socialists that's used to divide us. They keep trying to describe us. They keep trying to describe your channel.
OK, well, there we are, our very own Christopher Hope there at the Conservative Party conference, interviewing Tory leadership hopeful Tom Tugendhat. Some little jokes made there to amuse the audience of Conservative Party members. Of course, they'll be deciding who they want to reach that final two in the leadership contest. Now, there's lots more to talk about. The maternity pay row continues. Kemi Badenoch, she's come under fire for suggesting that perhaps there's too much in the way of maternity pay. I know a lot of women would disagree with that. She says her words have been misrepresented. Also, Robert Jenrick, he says we should display the Star of David at the UK border to show we stand with Israel. What do you make of that? After the break.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Janis Joplin shot to fame in 1967, but after releasing 3 albums, she was dead 3 years later at the age of 27, having overdosed on heroin.
Yes, very, very brief life, but towering influence. People like Pink in the modern day have said that she is the influence. But she was around so briefly, I guess, burned very brightly and a very troubled soul. And what we've got is A Night with Janis Joplin, the musical. And I think a lot of the problems, it's been getting very mixed reviews, and I think the problem is with this subtitle, the musical. That does it no justice at all. Really? It's staggering, stunning in an audience. So what we have is A Night With. It's as if she's in concert. She's sitting on the stage, she's swinging from a bottle, and she's singing and giving us little memories, thoughts on life.
I think I see where you're going, because some critics have said it's a fantastic individual performance that sits in an empty vessel of a show.
Yeah.
And you're saying that that's because the expectations of what the show is have been wrong.
Yes, I agree. And I do think that it's obviously a very loving show. There's very little reference to drugs. There's a bit of a throwaway comment. So we don't really look at the demons. What we do is we explore womanhood very powerfully, but also the blues.
How long do we have to see this?
This one it's on until September the 28th. It's on at the Peacock, which is just down by Aldwych in London.
Quite a small auditorium, actually.
No, it's a big auditorium. So the Peacock is it's a bit of a barn of a room. And again, I would say this show might be better in a slightly smaller venue, but I cannot recommend the performances highly enough.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. This is Good Afternoon Britain. It is now 2:24. Now, there's a huge amount going on when it comes to politics. Anyway, the government, in response to the whole Freebie Gate scandal, is to tighten transparency rules for ministerial hospitality. This, of course, after the whole row over freebies received by Labour ministers. They're trying to draw a line under this whole issue. They're trying to draw a line. Now, the information around declarations is currently published by departments, but less frequently and without a requirement to specify the value. So they're trying to tighten this up to try and prove to the public that they've got this all under control. Now, this also comes as Robert Jenrick on the Conservative side, he's been forced to defend receiving a £75,000 donation, despite criticising Labour in the freebies row. Is it the same thing, though? Is it the same thing? Well, joining me now to discuss this is political correspondent at the Financial Times, Anna Gross. Anna, thank you very much indeed. It's interesting, isn't it? The government are clearly trying to draw a line under Freebie Gate. They're trying to stop all the media speculation, all the bad press, all the bad headlines. They say they're going to shake up how and when ministers and MPs declare certain donations, gifts, freebies, etc. Is that the point, though? Is this about how and when these things are declared, or is it about something far bigger for the public?
Not at all. And I think there's actually a fair bit of confusion about what it is that Pat McFadden announced yesterday in terms of changing the rules. He's not saying that he's going to change the rules for MPs for things like what Keir Starmer received or Rachel Reeves received, the Chancellor, or Angela Rayner. in fact, it's kind of a dead cat that's being thrown, and because I think there's a bit of confusion, some media operations are sort of lapping it up. What he's actually saying is trying to attack the Tories and saying, while people like Starmer and Reeves and Rayner had to declare gifts that they received and hospitality that they received, the Tories never had to, because ministers don't have to abide by the same rules in their MPs register. They have to register hospitality and gifts and things in another place. So the reality is he's not actually saying anything. He's going to clean up the active MPs. He's just saying we're going to try and bring it in so that ministers can't get away with this.
Right, okay, so that's quite different from the way it's been presented, as this is the way to sort of draw a line under all of this freebie gate, and this is a way to make sure that ministers and MPs are declaring absolutely everything at exactly the right time, in exactly the right way, so no one needs to worry about it. I mean, how damaging has this whole scandal been for Keir Starmer? I mean, I've seen his favourability ratings. They've been tanking, plummeting over this, and he continues to refuse to apologise. It seems to me, and I think it seems to an awful lot of the public, that he thinks he hasn't done anything wrong at all.
I think it is really damaging, and I think it's one of those rare things in politics that does seem to have quite a lot of cut through to the public. It's something that the public can really get their head around. They're sitting there and they're thinking, hang on a sec, why are MPs, why is the future Prime Minister on his salary getting free suits? And now this is £32,000 worth of suits of clothes. That's a hell of a lot of money when we are going through cost of living crisis or struggling to pay for things, and we have to pay for it ourselves. I think it is damaging. I think it's particularly damaging because Starmer's kind of built this reputation ahead of the election of being squeaky clean, of saying, you know, we're going to clean up politics, we're not going to be having the same kind of cronyism battles. And actually, when this came to light, it undermines that, and also it undermines that image that he hasn't sort of gotten ahead of it right at the beginning and saying, look, there's a bit of a mistake, we're not going to do that again. Instead, it's sort of dragged out, coming out in drips and drabs, and I think it has been really quite damaging.
Yeah, I think it's been quite badly handled, but also reading that Rachel Reeves may be targeting pensions come the budget. There's quite a lot of fear that it will be pensions that are raided when it comes to extra taxes. What have you heard on that front?
I think it's definitely an option that's on the table, and it's something that her team have looked at. I don't think it's quite clear yet whether that is going to be what's selected. I think the other area is that's very likely to be targeted at this point. There's a huge amount of speculation is capital gains tax, bring that more in line with income tax. But yeah, there are a raft of things on the table, and she's obviously hemmed herself in. She's not able to increase income tax or national insurance contributions, and so she's looking for other places where she can raise that capital.
I do wonder, there's just been far too much time, a lot of people would say, so much time before the budget for all of this speculation. I mean, we've seen the headlines, consumer confidence down, business confidence down, simply because there's been so much speculation over which taxes might rise. People are worried about their assets being taxed more. People are worried now about their pensions and the like. And of course, you've got the pensioners with their winter fuel payments. We know that for sure. But so much else has been left so murky for so long. What are you hearing in terms of the impact on the economy and the impact on business?
Well, I think it has led, it is a dampener on companies being able to invest and make long-term decisions, because they are waiting just a little bit longer before they make some of those decisions. And from a political point of view, I think the historians will look back at this time and say it was a real error, leaving this huge gap. Well, huge for the start of a government, a very significant gap between coming into power on the 4th of July and a budget, the first budget on October 30th, because it's just meant that there's so much sort of time for people to be speculating about what's going on, and so much time where departments, ministers, policymakers can't move forward with really important reforms on things like the NHS, on things like education. And in that period, people are filling in the blanks, and they're latching on to stories like this one about cronyism and about freebies and things, because there is a void, there is an absence of other things going on.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think they might regret leaving so much time between being elected back in July and then the budget in October. That's a hell of a long time for people to speculate over which taxes might go up and where spending might be cut or increased and the like. But thank you very much indeed. Anna Gross, political correspondent at the Financial Times. She's there in Birmingham at the Conservative Party conference. Well, let me know your thoughts on everything, but we've got lots more coming up on today's show, including the Middle East on the verge of all-out war, according to some, and Lebanon on the verge of a humanitarian catastrophe. More on that after the break.
Good afternoon. It's just after 2:30. The main headlines from the GB News Centre. The BBC has apologised to former Strictly Come Dancing contestant Amanda Abbington, saying it had assessed and upheld some, but not all, of her complaints about Giovanni Pernici's behaviour during her time on the show. BBC management have upheld 6 out of 17 allegations, some of which are for the professional dancer's use of swear words. Well, in a statement this afternoon, Mr Pernici said he was pleased the BBC had not found any evidence of threatening or abusive behaviour by him. Former Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has hit out at what he calls Labour's lies about their economic inheritance. Speaking at the Tory party conference, he took particular aim at his successor, Rachel Reeves, describing her claims of a £22 billion black hole as fictitious.
The biggest lies we've had since Labour came to office is this nonsense about having the worst economic inheritance since the Second World War. I mean, that is a legacy, frankly, that I would have died to have when I became Chancellor. I think the economy's got very solid.
The UK government says it's secured more seats on civilian airlines in order to help British nationals in Lebanon to leave the country. Well, overnight, Israeli airstrikes targeted central Beirut for the first time. The Lebanese Prime Minister has said up to 1 million people have been displaced as fighting between Israel and the terror group Hezbollah continues. Meanwhile, Hamas said its leader in Lebanon has been killed, along with some members of his family, in an airstrike overnight in southern Lebanon. The Duke of Sussex is making a rare visit to the UK today to celebrate the achievements and resilience of seriously ill youngsters and their families. Prince Harry will attend the Well Child Awards ceremony in London in his role as the charity's patron, a position he's held for more than 15 years. The King is believed to be spending time at his Balmoral residence. It's thought he hasn't seen Harry since the Duke rushed to his father's side at the King's cancer after the King's cancer diagnosis in February. The legendary country music singer and actor Chris Christopherson has died at the age of 88. A family spokesperson said the star passed away peacefully at his home in Hawaii on Saturday. He won 3 Grammys for Best Country Song, Help Me Make It Through the Night, and starred alongside Barbra Streisand in the film made in 1976, A Star Is Born, for which he won a Golden Globe. OK, you're right up to date with all the latest headlines. We'll have more for you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Drier weather is on the way eventually, but it stays unsettled at first this week with further heavy rain in places. as the area of low pressure that brought very strong winds and wet weather to the south and west during Sunday tracks across central parts of the UK, bringing a swathe of very wet weather into parts of northern and eastern England and North Wales, as well as parts of eastern Northern Ireland. That's where the heaviest rain will be through these central parts. Risk of further flooding in one or two spots, particularly northeast England. To the south, cloudy with some showery rain into the southwest of England and gusty winds here as well. To the north, well, mostly fine for northern Scotland, although damp for the central belt and into southern Scotland. Further showers to come into the evening across the southwest, drier towards the southeast, but we've still got rain coming down across North Wales, northeast England, into parts of Northern Ireland. So tricky conditions on the roads perhaps at this stage in the day. The central belt into central and northern Scotland, it's brighter and there'll be some clear spells, but also one or two showers and a brisk wind coming in from the east. That wind, though, will be strongest across eastern England as we end the day and go into the start of Tuesday, bringing further wet weather into East Anglia and then eventually into the Midlands as well. That rain will push south. Elsewhere, further west, one or two showers overnight, but lighter winds, some clear spells. And actually a bright start for Northern Ireland and Western Scotland. That's where the best of the sunshine will be during Tuesday morning. It will brighten up across Western England and Wales as well. A few showers here and there. But for Eastern England, that's where we're going to see strong winds and outbreaks of rain continuing through Tuesday, making it feel particularly unpleasant. Highs of 12 or 13 Celsius.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon to you. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley, County Durham. Firstly, and the northbound A1M is still slow going. There's emergency bridge repairs between junction 60 and 61. Bradbury up to Bowburn, so slow going. A lane still shut. A lane coned off too, eastbound on the M62 is just after Rishworth Moor junction 22. A vehicle undergoing a tyre change there, so slow going. Slow east for the M56 up Holland at 5 to the Orrell interchange at junction 26 for the M6. So that collision there causing queues, a lane closed. A lane shut for the earlier bump still northbound at the M6 after Stoke at 15. All lanes back open, but it's still slow. And to Halstead in Essex, the A131 is still closed between Russell's Road and High Barn Hall Road in queuing. That's at the scene there of an accident. And for now, that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Right, OK, welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. It is now 2:38 and it's time to speak to Martin Daubney because he's up at 3 o'clock. Martin, thank you very much indeed. Tell us what's on the menu this afternoon.
Well, an excellent show today, Emily. Brilliant stuff from you. Got to say, we'll be carrying on for the Tory Party conference, of course. Kemi Badenoch, mum's the word. What on earth was she thinking by, of all the people in Britain, taking on the Mumsnet vote? Has she lost it? Well, we'll be grilling her between 3 and 4 p.m. Chris Hope will be on the stage with the leadership hopeful. Jacob Rees-Mogg, well, he's put the cat amongst pigeons today by suggesting at a fringe event the way forward to power is for the Conservatives to stand aside in 98 seats where they came where the Reform Party came second to Labour. A pact with the Reform Party, is that the way to ensure that the Labour Party is kicked out of power in 2029? Will the Tories ever listen to that, though? They seem to feel entitled that they hold the whip hand of power in the right. All those times gone. Also, emotionally, I'll be joined by Emma Webber, Barnaby Webber's mother, of course, who was tragically stabbed to death by Valdo Cullicani in Nottingham. She feels all the victims have been betrayed by the independent police watchdog, and she'll tell me why. Also, Ratcliffe-on-Soar power station. I could see that from my bedroom window as a lad. My dad, 47 years down the pit, shoveled the coal that went into that power station. A sad, talismanic day for Britain's net zero madness. It's all coming 3 till 6.
Sounds like a fantastic show, and you're absolutely right about Kemi Badenoch. Why on earth would she say that about maternity pay? I mean, every young mother I speak to, or indeed older mother, says it's absolutely measly, the amount of money you get for your maternity pay. Certainly not living it large when you're in that stage of your life. Anyway, we're going to move on because Lebanon is on the verge of a humanitarian catastrophe, according to officials, who also warning almost 1 million Lebanese people have been displaced by Israeli bombing. It follows an Israeli attack in in the centre of Beirut last night, the first strike within city limits. Now, over in the United States, President Biden is stressing that an all-out war in the Middle East has to be avoided. OK, well, how can it be? Joining me now to discuss this is defence analyst James Marlowe. James, thank you very much indeed. We hear all the time the need for de-escalation, 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 simmer down the tensions in this region. They just seem to be getting hotter and hotter.
Well, one of the reasons why they're getting hotter and hotter is because Israel, from Israel's point of view, is under attack from 7 fronts, not just 3 fronts.
Seven fronts?
7 fronts. Just yesterday, within a 12-hour period, there were rockets and missiles and UAVs coming in from Yemen, from Lebanon, and from Iraq. The other countries, of course, Gaza, Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Of course, you've got Iran, you've got missiles and rockets coming in from Syria, and you've also got Hamas and Islamic Jihad still very, very strong within Judea and Samaria, what Jordan used to call between 1948 to 1967 the West Bank. So Israel is under tremendous pressure at this point, but it's beginning to get the upper hand. And the reason why it's beginning to get the upper hand is because it's been planning this for about 2 years' time. It always knew that Hezbollah in Lebanon, backed, of course, by the Iranian regime, it always knew that it had around 300,000 rockets aimed at Israel, and that it could hit Israel, including Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and south of Tel Aviv in areas like Beersheba. And yet, at this point, because the tension was so high, and we have to remember, every single day since October the 8th of last year, every single day, and some of those days have included up to 150 rockets coming in from Lebanon. Every single day, Hezbollah has been firing into northern Israel. Now, there's been evacuation between 65,000 to 80,000 of those people. I'm just back from there. I came back last Thursday night. There's people that I know on the Lebanese border. In one particular case, they've got an apartment down in the south, so they've moved down there because they just said it's too dangerous. Plus, the Rut one, which is a faction within Hezbollah, were planning a October 7th attack a couple of weeks ago, which is the reason why Israel says that it actually enforced its plan to firstly hit with the walkie-talkies. Before that, of course, was the beepers. Then it started to take out its leadership, Hezbollah leadership, in an unbelievable way. And this showed that Hezbollah clearly had some type of a intelligence breach within its organisation. Now, its deputy have just come out and just said, well, we will fight back. But yet they're not. They're still hitting the northern Israel, and I just got word on my phone a short while ago that missiles are still coming across into northern Israel. They've hit Jerusalem on Saturday night. Again, sirens went off in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv. That's also happening because of the Houthis firing these long-range ballistic missiles. And if you have to remember that Yemen is a very, very poor country. It's poverty-stricken, literally. There's no work for anyone. Children are in this situation of below malnutrition. And yet Hezbollah, the Iranian-backed Houthis are the ones who are just putting all their money into these ballistic missiles which are firing at Israel. So it is a hot situation, but nevertheless, of course, those who get behind Israel, the Israelis, are very pleased to hear that the spokesperson for Keir Starmer actually said that we very much support our Israel, and we support Israel, and they use the word ironclad, our relationship. And of course, President Biden has also said the same thing.
Well, that's very important, isn't it? Because Benjamin Netanyahu has accused Starmer's government, 1 or 2 weeks ago, for perhaps mixed messages towards their commitment to Israel. This was over the decision to suspend some of those arms sales to Israel. What do you make of the sort of live debate we appear to have in this country over whether we should be supporting and backing Israel? Of course, Israel have inflicted many a civilian casualty. People are saying, Israel, every time Israel seems to fight back or airstrikes or whatever it is, now there's talk of maybe even a ground invasion into Lebanon, accused of overstepping the mark, accused of making the problem worse, accused of perhaps doing more than just defending itself as a nation.
Yeah.
What do you make of that debate that's ongoing? Is it a dangerous one?
Look, if you take just as an example the Hezbollah, who've been firing into Israel for the last 11 months. 11 months. Yes, it's true that Israeli Air Force have hit back at certain Hezbollah munition dumps and also taken out some of the Hezbollah senior commanders and deputy commanders over the last 8 months. But nevertheless, it's been relentless. they've been firing from civilian areas inside of Lebanon into civilian areas within northern Israel. And as a result, as I mentioned, between 65 to 80,000 people have left their homes. Some of the children have got no school for almost a year. Families are broken up. It's been a very difficult situation. And I'm not sure the British government, the American government, would wait 11 months. I'm not even sure that it would wait 11 days. So Israel makes it very clear that it's going after the terrorists, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Islamic Jihad, Hamas. It doesn't want to hit the civilians. But sometimes, and if I can just add this last line on this point, is that sometimes in order to achieve the peace, you have to go after those who are totally opposed to peace. The Iranian regime, plus all its proxies, are totally devoted to the destruction of Israel and all of its citizens. If you can get rid of them, then there's a great possibility.
Because people say
that
the way to resolve this and create peace is through diplomacy, through talking, through negotiation. Is it possible to negotiate with
But that's been done. It's been done since 2005, 2006. 2006, United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701 specifically said at the end of the last Lebanon war that Hezbollah could no longer be in southern Lebanon. It had to move right back. It had to take its forces back, had to take all its arms back. It didn't imply it. The United Nations forces came onto the ground, but they did absolutely nothing because they're impotent. They can't fight against Hezbollah. Hezbollah are one of the most powerful military armies in the world. They could take perhaps half of the registered countries with the United Nations. Nobody wants to go up against them, and it's Israel who's doing that. And what's very interesting is you're seeing Arabs in jubilation in certain communities across Lebanon, Syria, Iran, Yemen, Egypt, and United Arab Emirates, in Bahrain, who are really happy that Hassan Nasrallah has been taken out. Of course they're going to be replaced. But this is a message that Israel is sending to say, we can reach you, meaning Israel can reach them.
Yeah, and it's crazy sometimes to see people living in the West who see that as some sort of shame that these people have been, taken out. Anyway, James Marlowe, thank you very much indeed, defence analyst. Always good to speak to you. That was James Marlowe. Now, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. I would say this is a lighter story, but it's pretty miserable, actually. There's more weather warnings to come. The Met Office issued 2 weather alerts for more heavy rain. We'll find out exactly where is going to be worst affected after the break.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
SpaceX has completed its first private spacewalk. What do you mean you don't know what I'm talking about? Billionaire Jared Isaacman became the first non-professional astronaut to walk in space this morning. It was live on Britain's newsroom. I didn't know what I was watching. Here's his reaction.
SpaceX, back at home we all have a lot of work to do, but from here, Earth sure looks like a perfect world.
So that was him coming out of his little capsule. He was attached to the capsule by what they call the umbilical, by a cord, and that was obviously the Earth in the background. It does raise the question, though, Tom, doesn't it? Can you justify the expense? We don't know the true figure that cost to get that spacecraft into air and to have this billionaire up there. We don't know, but let's just say it's in the hundreds of millions at least. How do you justify it when we can't get clean water to half the planet?
Just, Bev, to demonstrate that I'm not engaged here in the politics of envy. I mean, this is a private company, SpaceX. Elon Musk is a private individual. He's attracted these fees, if you like, to go up into space. So, absolutely, this is a plutocrat on a joyride in space that's been over the news. I think there's a broader issue here about, instead of joyrides in space, actually we should be solving, as you say, the water challenges, the educational challenges, the malarial challenges in part of this world, and indeed the challenges in our own country with a quadrupling of the number of people that are visiting food banks just in the last 10 years or so. So there are plenty of social problems. If entrepreneurs and billionaires have got money to give away, to throw away, they should be putting them into solving those very human problems on this planet.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. It's 2:51 and I'm terribly sorry to report this, but heavy rain. It's set to continue. The Met Office has issued not one but two fresh weather warnings for heavy rain across some parts of the UK today. There are yellow alerts in place across several regions. Forecasters predicting up to 60 millimetres of rainfall in some areas. So just how bad is it going to continue to be? Joining me now is Met Office meteorologist and presenter Aidan McGivern. Aidan, thank you very much indeed. More and more rain.
Yes, unfortunately, I'm sick of talking about it as well. But it's Northern England today, as well as parts of Northern Ireland and North Wales, where we're seeing the thoroughly wet weather continuing. That's going to last through the night and into tomorrow morning in some areas. But it is improving. Drier weather is starting to arrive tomorrow from the west, so it's going to take some time to get to the east.
Oh, fantastic. So things are going to get better. But some of this weather has left a bit of destruction, hasn't it? There's been flooding, people's homes, roads, rivers overflowing and the like. It's got quite bad.
Yeah, it's been a horrendous 10 days. It started the weekend before last when we had torrential thunderstorms across a large swathe of central England and parts of Wales. And as a result of those thunderstorms, we saw a month or even 2 months worth of rainfall in a short amount of time. Then we had further spells of rain last week. And now today we've been able to confirm that 8 counties across central and central southern England have had their record rainfall for September. And one of those counties, Oxfordshire, has had its record for any month of the year, and those records go back to 1836. So this September 2024 has been the wettest month of all time in the records since 1836.
Goodness me, is it because we had a long period of quite dry weather and so it all comes chucking down at once? Why is this?
Well, we had 4 days of dry weather leading up to that, so that's long in the grand scheme of things when you look at the last few months at least. But yeah, and then the heavens opened last weekend and it's just been raining very hard since. So we had the thunderstorms and had further spells of rain last week. And it's been a recurring theme, hasn't it, in the last few months? And in fact, going back to the end of last year, we've just had these spells of wet weather carrying on, especially across southern and central parts of the UK.
Well, you know what? I'm going to cling on to what you said, Aidan, that there's some drier weather coming our way, although it seems, I mean, being down in London, we usually have, you know, the warmest spells, but it's been absolutely horrendous. Anyway, Aidan McGivern, thank you very much indeed for talking to us about the awful weather we've been experiencing. Anyway, thank you very much indeed for watching Good Afternoon Britain. We're going to be back tomorrow at 12 o'clock. Of course we are, but it is Martin Daubney up next with an action-packed show for you, so stick around.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Cloudy for many of us during the rest of today with further heavy rain across some central parts of the UK. Showers in the far north and the far south away from the centre of this area of low pressure, which is slowly moving east. But on the northern flank of this low, that's where we've got this band of heavy and persistent rain across northern England, in particular Yorkshire and Lincolnshire during the evening. Could cause some issues. And that rain band slowly sinks south to bring further wet weather into those areas that were so badly affected by rain last week. So that's the Midlands, parts of East Anglia. Now that rain's moving through, but showers elsewhere across the country, some clear spells in the west and here temperatures will dip into the single figures. But it'll be a bright start to the day across Northern Ireland, the far southwest, so Cornwall seeing some sunny spells, albeit with some showers moving into parts of the southwest. Wales also a lot of cloud around, but a few showers as well. Now for northwest England, western Scotland and Northern Ireland, that's where the clearest skies will be first thing. Plenty of sunshine on offer. There's just a few showers pushing into the northeast of Scotland.